Okay, we are live. It is 7 p.m. Wednesday, November 14th. This is Dr. Otto. We are commencing the Policy Review Committee. Turn it over to the chairman, Frank Sermonaro.
Okay. In attendance on our side, we'll just go around. It's Dr. Otto. It's Frank Sermonaro.
Monica Hamill.
Bill Marco. And Mr. Basil is running a little late, but he will be here shortly.
We have 4 members of the public here as well in the audience.
Okay. First, I guess we'll just go. We're not going to do 829 first. We're going to do.
That's your call as the chair. If you wanted to, you had kind of said when we discussed this that you wanted to maybe put that one up front.
Yeah.
Let me just say why I would recommend that. 2A through F are just our routine reviews. The staff student participation policy is really still, that just for the record is a current policy. It has not been altered or changed. What we're trying to do is work through the issue of the no texting and trying to find a common ground that everyone can agree on as far as the administrative guideline that we would put in place to go along with this policy would be implemented. So that's where we are now.
Okay. I know I know that's a big topic, and probably most people are here to discuss that as well. So why don't we review these other ones quickly and give Mr. Basil a chance to get here.
That's fine.
Everyone can participate. So if we can run through these quickly, then why don't we do that?
Okay, Bill, you want to start with Policy 106 then?
Sure. Policy 106 was the adoption of originally titled Courses of Study. We're changing that to, as you can see, and I'm not going to read all the changes, but planned instruction, adoption of planned instruction. You can see where things were crossed out. Hopefully you had a chance to read these ahead of time. I think Lori got them to you a couple days ago, hopefully.
I have some questions about these as I go through.
Absolutely.
Because I was reading through them, and the adoption of planned instruction, who actually creates that? Because I have all these little notes, posties. Who creates the instruction? The teacher?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, teachers they have in the past been paid to write the curriculum at the high school anyway, and I'm sure at the middle school also. I don't know what took place at the elementary level.
So they submit, kind of give me an overview of what this actually does, because the way I was reading it.
Well, let's take it back a step. The reason for this revision is when courses of study used to be the old language in the state code. So many of these policies are based on what the state directs you kind of to do. What we put into local wording is just an implementation of what, because if you look at this language across districts, it's probably almost identical. Mm-hmm. This is just putting our local spin on what the state allows us to do to put together our curriculum in a broad sense. So the language that you see scratched out there used to be the old language under what was called Chapter 5, but the state changed its curriculum regulations and labeled them under Chapter 4. So that's when you see all those 4s on the side in the right-hand column there. Those are all the references to the state guidelines that we have to follow. So what we're basically saying is this is just a general guideline of giving the local district the authority to go ahead and plan all of in a large sense, all of the curriculum and instruction. And then as we develop each course, then it comes to you as a board and you see it and approve it.
Okay, because then I was looking at the first, just from the title. Should the title actually be changed?
That's what we did.
Oh, I didn't see any cross-outs on the actual.
You mean up at the top?
Right.
Yes,
Would
you
that
actually, yes, we do.
change?
That does need to, yes, that's a good point.
I was,
Yeah,
I
that
was
will
just
change.
looking at consistency, and there were some inconsistencies in
Right.
it, so I was just like, well.
No, go ahead in case we
didn't
missed
catch
something.
That will change.
That will definitely, the new title of the policy will become Adoption of Planned Instruction because
Okay.
no one uses courses of study anymore at the state level.
All right, because I looked at that and I thought, well, how does this work if this is this and this is this?
Right, now that was a mistake. That's just not done on there.
All right, so it's the teachers that put this together, and then I was looking at the definition aspect of it. Let's see if my notes come up.
See, what the state code says is if you take, for example, for the purposes of this policy under definition, a planned instruction shall be defined as the planned course which consists of at least. Mm-hmm. So if a planned instruction in Algebra 1 would have a very specific, it's like a little booklet. This is what we plan to do if you take Algebra 1 at minimum, you're supposed to have what the objectives are, the content to be taught, what credit you're going to get for it, and the expected levels of achievement and procedures for evaluation. That's typical curriculum development.
Okay.
That's all that's saying at a broad level. And what we did was under 3, instead of wording it the way it used to be worded, we changed it. It still is saying it always has to have board approval before it's implemented.
Okay.
So that's not really changing, that's just changing the words. And we added our local spin would be what's there at the bottom. Since we've adopted this curriculum and instruction committee, most of that stuff starts at that level. So that's what that statement's in there for. That is not part of, you don't have to, by state regulations, have a curriculum and instruction committee. You can do it all at the board level. We now have that in place, so that's why we inserted that. This actually was one we just missed in the sequence of policies. That's why it's not, the numbering is a little bit different there.
And then I have your available funds directly from the school district. There's somewhere in here that's stated funds. I think it's under authority. It shall be the policy of the board based on available funds. And my note was available funds directly from the school district. And
I think
the district,
in this policy,
it says here under authority, right here, based on available funds. You added that, right?
Can you scroll up a little bit? You're on interscholastic athletics. Very good at 106.
No, I don't buy it. Okay, thank you.
yeah, there's nothing with funding in here.
Okay. I had all these little
That's
notes,
okay.
sticky
That's-
notes, and I was hitting them, but
You can save that comment for when we do 115.
all right, let me look at these other stickies. All right. And so, continuously evaluate these plans. Like, do you have a set time that you continuously evaluate?
We actually, one of the things we don't have in this district is a curriculum review cycle.
Okay.
It's probably something we should get to. That's usually the way they're done. Every district has not every district, some districts do, we just don't. So until it would just come up for review in a way that someone would feel it would need to be changed, we really don't go through a systematic evaluation of them.
So should it say that you have a continuous evaluation, or more of when it's necessary? Because it says the superintendent is responsible for the continuous evaluation of the planned instruction and shall recommend to the board such new courses. So to me, that just means you're always doing it, but now it sounds like you're not always doing it.
No, I think we're always doing it. I just don't think it's systematic.
Okay.
I don't think there's, and I can check on that. There might be something I'm actually missing. So, Bill, I don't know.
It's not done by an official body, but teachers would often come forward and say, well, this course isn't meeting the needs of all the kids in this class, and maybe we need to have another math course. For example, we have a couple of math teachers here from the high school. I know that we had that recommendation before in years past. So in that way, it is done by the teachers, but there's not a curriculum review committee like Dr. Otto said. But it's done in that way.
One of the goals that we would have going forward is to actually put in place a curriculum review process. It's just, to be quite honest with you, something we haven't done as a district. Some districts have it; they have it built in where year 1 we're going to review math and science. Year 2 you'll review language arts and reading. Year 3 we don't have a plan like that in place. So it is kind of based on teacher initiation and building administrator initiation as to what we need to do. A lot of the curriculum review has kind of gone away too as a result of the state's emphasis and taking it away. We've lost a lot of local control with the implementation of PSSAs. So the standards have kind of become the curriculum. So districts don't necessarily, what I'm trying to say in another way is that the state's kind of telling us what to do with curriculum. We don't really have a lot of local, I mean, we can maybe buy a certain textbook or do this or do that, but standard 4.3.1 you will be able to do this in reading is kind of determined by the state standards now and all that common core language that you hear being talked about now. Mm-hmm. So the use of the word continuous evaluation, it's going on. It's just not there's not a document you could look at the way we used to that says we're going to do math this year, science this year. Because the state has pretty much usurped the district's local control over a lot of what goes on in the curriculum because we're now held accountable to the standards under PSSA.
Okay.
I know that's a long answer, but that was a good
No,
question.
fine.
That's a good
as
question.
I read through it, I was like, well, I never saw like how that worked, but.
I guess what I would say is reviewing curriculum anymore has become kind of, you're reviewing what the state's telling you to do, and you really can't tell them, no, we're not going to do that.
Right.
Because if you don't do that, then you risk not doing well on a section of the PSSA tests that expect kids to be able to write a coherent paragraph, for example. And if you decide, well, we don't really want that in our curriculum, then your PSSA scores are going to reflect it.
Right.
So you have to be careful with that. So
Okay.
there is a continuous review of what we are offering and doing, and I would say that's manifested more at the high school and middle school level as the course of studies is brought forward every year. Because every year you take a look at that booklet that gives the course offerings. That's probably the most consistent review of what we do on an annual basis.
Okay. And I guess my last one was new courses shall be reviewed and recommended by the Curriculum and Instruction Committee for board approval after review and recommendation of specific areas by teachers and administrators. Does the teachers and administrators put it together and then it comes to the board for approval? Am I reading that right?
Well,
Does the curriculum, like my thought process here was, our board members, and I don't want to,
no, just
are
say
we
it.
qualified to be making those recommendations, the final say on curriculum, if we're all not educators?
I would say to you, really, it's you rely on us to say, here's our recommendation on this, and then you ask the questions that you can ask, and we are doing our due diligence to make sure that what we're presenting to you answers the questions that you might have. So you're not specifically looking at it and creating it. The teachers and the administrators, based on their expertise in the area, bring it forward. But you, as a representative of the public, should really be reviewing it. You don't have to have as an intensive a knowledge of it to be able to approve it. As long as we tell you it does meet state standards, it's going to help our kids do better, it's going to do all those things that it purports to do, and it meets these things up here.
Right.
It tells you what the assessment is. Those are the kind of general things that you should be looking for. But I understand what you're saying. How would you know what a Spanish 4 curriculum is when you can't even speak Spanish? I understand that. So, or you're not a math expert. So you just have to trust the experts that are bringing it forward, that they've gone through the process properly, and that we have in place all of the things that we need to from a regulatory standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years at the high school, the primary question always was, is this going to require more staff? If we approve this course, whatever, sociology or a math course or science, the question, and it was before there was a curriculum and instruction committee, was presented at the committee of the whole. And so the question always was, well, is this going to...
Would it be possible to move the microphone a little bit closer to Mr. McMoyle?
There's no microphone in here.
Oh, okay.
I'll talk louder, Connor. So it was done that way. But that was,
Okay, that's much better. Thank you.
that was the primary question, usually from the committee of the whole, and I assume will be for the curriculum and instruction. If there are new courses brought forward, is it going to require more staff? What's it going to cost?
And that's one of the main reasons you bring it before the board, because you could go, wow, that sounds really great. And I go, oh, by the way, I need 3 teachers to do that. And you go, well, where are you getting that?
Okay.
So that's one of the purposes of bringing forward these things as well.
Okay, because I was like, well, if the teachers put it together, the administrative approves it, everybody thinks it should work. I didn't think the board, went back and read everything that you prepared.
Right.
Everything. All right, I understand now. Thank you.
So if there are no objections for that one, we'll send that one forward next month.
Looks good to me.
That was 106.
106.
Yeah, I have any issues with that one.
So it is written.
115, interscholastic athletics. I guess my only comment on this one was, is this related to the discussion we had at the committee of the whole meeting regarding homeschooled students and addressing that issue with them?
No, not really. This is a policy that we had on the books. We figured the last time it was looked at, it's been talked a lot about, but it hasn't been touched since 1987. So the only thing that we really changed about this policy in light of the budget was we inserted the language based on available funds. That never said that. This policy kind of committed the board to regardless, because if you take out the italics under authority, it says it shall be the policy of this board to offer opportunities. You were kind of locked into it. Now with that, that actually should be comma in there. Based on available funds, based on difficult budget times, you would now have the ability to say, no, wait a minute, we need to evaluate that. So that's why we put that in there.
Right, and the only comment I put on here is that the available funds directly from the school district, and if the district is unable to support the program, will it be the responsibility, somehow maybe if we have to put in the responsibility of the individual sport to support that program. Like, I didn't know if we needed to take it a step further, that if we don't have the money for it, that they could
Well,
do it
for example, you
individually, or is that
have
just
lacrosse
assumed?
and you have tennis right now that we currently don't support other than providing them with the use of our facilities. And obviously our athletic facilitator, I think, kind of coordinates their game schedules, does she not?
Yeah, we do everything for them as though they were ours, except pay for it.
Except pay for it. Right. So I'm not sure how, I mean, they obviously fall under this proviso as well, correct? This policy. So maybe there should be something in here that sort of addresses unfunded sports. I'm not sure where you'd slip that in, but...
Well, I think to me it would make most sense to include it somewhere in the definition, because if you look at the end of that paragraph, it says the purposes of this policy, and go to the end, when events between separate schools, it says all activities relating to competitive sports contests, games or events or sports involving individual students or teams of students of this district when such events occur between separate schools within this district or with any schools outside this district. So I think that language would have to be intertwined there somewhere. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
I get what you're getting at.
The other thing about the definition that I was thinking of is this, I mean, I know the title of this thing is interscholastic athletics. I think we need to have a definition of what that means, to include band, perhaps, or the marching band, because currently they pay an activity fee like everybody else does, and you know, this refers to sport contests and sport exhibitions, talks about inter-school athletic programs, but it doesn't talk about, you know, is band an athletic program or is it not?
No, it's not under where you would have to separate, and I think our administrative guideline might help deal with that.
On page 4, the AG does address clubs.
Yeah, I saw that on there on the athletic, or I'm sorry, on the administrative guideline. We talk about clubs and
Music organizations.
and music organizations. I'm just wondering whether either you strike athletic from the policy, those references to sports and athletics, because it's specifically pertaining only to sports and athletics. So whether you just say interscholastic competitions or whatever it is, you just take sports out of it and the adjective athletics out of there, and then it applies to anything that the guideline says it applies to. So if you're looking at line 12 and 13, it just says, you know, include all activities relating to the competitive contests, games or events or exhibitions, as opposed to sport contests and sport exhibitions. And under line 21, where it says, you know, offer opportunities for participation in inter-school athletic programs to male, it just says inter-school programs. I mean, that's just my thought. And then maybe you strike interscholastic, I don't know if you rephrase.
Extracurricular programs.
Yeah, I mean, instead of interscholastic athletics as the header, it's interscholastic extracurricular programs at the very top. line 1. Those are just sort of my thoughts on that, so that it applies to everything that is being addressed in the guideline. The only other thing I thought to add in here somewhere was, let's see, on page 2, like lines 1 through 9, talks about our standards of eligibility, and students have to be covered by accident insurance, and students have to be in good physical condition and free of injury. Should we have a reference in here to our concussion and cardiac policies? Because now they have to file a waiver for those things too.
I thought we added that. Where did we put that?
I didn't see it in the policy, so.
Not in the policy, but I thought we did add it maybe in the guideline.
It was added somewhere, because I remember I wrote how many concussions are they allowed to have or something like that.
It's under physical examination of the guidelines, section 2 programs, letter A, section 1.
Oh, yeah, including pre-concussion.
I remember when we talked about this, we made sure we put that in there.
Okay, so that's got the concussion one. Does they have cardiac one in here too?
No, it doesn't.
So we should have the cardiac one in here as well.
And just a minor inconsistency where it says athletic director. Do you mean to change that to athletic facilitator?
Yeah, we may have missed that.
We may have missed that
There's a
one.
couple that have been missed.
In terms of the cardiac policy or whatever, I mean, I think students and parents must also properly, the bottom of page 2, or still under that physical examination, it says students and parents must also properly complete the assumption of risk form and the certificate of insurance form. You'd obviously have to add to that the new cardiac arrest acknowledgement form that's required by the law. And then it says under B in the next page, the school will provide physical examinations at the school on unannounced dates. And then it talks about if the school misses it. Should there be something in here that those exams are going to be provided at a cost to be charged to the student? Because we currently charge for our physicals.
I mean, we can work some language in there.
I don't know whether it's important to have it in there or not.
I mean, it doesn't obviate the need to do that.
No, I just, I don't know whether we need to declare that or not declare that. Under transportation, again, lines A and B, it talks about athletic events. And I don't know whether you strike the word athletic and you just refer to events, because later on we talk about clubs and band. And then same thing with...
Rather than, I would suggest keeping athletic in and just amend it with extra, like athletic / extracurricular activities.
Okay. And then same thing under 4C. It talks about all athletes traveling to games or meets will dress appropriately as representatives. Maybe that means just all students traveling, because sometimes you guys are interchanging athletes with students. If it's all students traveling to games or meets or events, then that applies to band and club members too.
Yeah, we can edit the language to reflect all, not just focused on athletics, because the title of it is, this guideline is Interscholastic Athletics / Activities Program. So we can amend, make the language, just run a thread through there that makes all that language consistent.
Okay. The last thing I saw, I think, was on F, 4F, talks about insurance claims must come through the coach. Should that just be limited to the coach, or should they also really be coming through the athletic trainer or athletic director or facilitator or the principal of the building? I mean, I'm not sure if our coaches are supposed to be the ones.
Bill, I defer to you and your experience with that as high school principal, how that was handled.
I think the athletic trainer, because that's who's going to see them. The coach is going to send them to the trainer, and then the trainer is going to document what he or she sees. They're going to, that's who the insurance company is going to want the information from, the athletic trainer.
Okay. And then the last comment I had was under, I guess you get all the way to the bottom of page 4B, where it says clubs. The club and activities program that the school offers a variety of experiences for the students. And I don't know whether you had to add, everywhere else we've added based on available funds. I don't know if you add that under B as well, because C and D have that in there. And that's all I had on That was my input.
I just had one other one that's slightly different. Is the same thing with transportation will be provided by the school district. And I thought once again we might want to say available funds. If the funds are available at the community event, just in case.
If we didn't have the funds, would we send our kids to? How
Well,
would
if
we?
the parents decided to get their own bus. I mean, if we didn't have the funds to send them to somewhere.
I would think that as part of your funding of an athletic program, you would build into that budget transportation. I don't think you would want to, but I don't think the statement ties your hands in any particular
in one way or
way.
the other.
And I had one question about who would be administering the pre-concussion exam. Was it
The trainer.
Okay.
Athletic trainer.
I think, was that in there? Athletic
That should probably fall under. Would that fall under the concussion policy guideline, or is that 132?
That the
I don't know.
athletic-
That
is
was,
132,
we did that earlier. That,
I might have a copy of
I
that
don't
in here.
know. I don't recall what that says, but typically it's, Bob did those even before it was required. It doesn't take that long to do it. But it is done by the athletic.
Connor, I'm sorry.
I think we lost Connor.
You still there, buddy?
Yeah, what's going on?
Just making sure you're listening.
Yeah.
We want you to stop doing your homework.
On this one here, the last one's
Can you hear everything that's going on, Connor?
Yeah, for the most part, it's a little bit difficult hearing sometimes if we can speak up. And then there was just that phone dialing.
Yeah, sorry, that was my fault. I hit the phone by accident.
Oh, all right.
That was my bad.
What do you want to know?
Yeah, but if we could all just speak up a little bit more, that would be
What do you want to know
that
about
would
the
be
concussion management, Andrew?
Oh, I just Monica had mentioned under the guideline for 115 we're looking at,
Right.
where it talks about, what paragraph is that on?
Physical examination. is that the
Physical,
paragraph?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Where it
I
talks
was just
about.
wondering who administered the exam. If they did go through our athletic trainer, are we accepting exams from the physicians?
The policy deals with that.
Policy.
Yeah, the
You can
policy
actually
says
go
a
to your own
licensed
doctor.
Psychologist and neuropsychology.
Okay, so then
You can go to your own doctor.
Or
You can
licensed
go to certified healthcare, somebody else
or a
that,
physician.
yes, somebody can sign off on that besides our own employee.
All right. Are we ready to move on?
Yep. Well, just for the benefit of those here in the public, feel free, when you have a question, to just interrupt us.
Exactly.
There's no 3-minute limit here at these meetings.
Policy 123, student services.
Bill?
Okay, this, well, actually, Dr. Otter, I think you can address it better. The student services replaces, is pretty much modeled after our Governor Mifflin's. When I researched student 123 and 124 is what this is replacing. The wording is all changed for 123. We didn't have Lori cross it all out because it was much too expensive. So we just put in.
This is one of those cases where the policy we have on the books is totally irrelevant. It's outdated. It's not what's happening anymore. It's not the state of the art. So they would require, from a policy standpoint, complete deletion. And you have to, for the record, we would have to post those in the minutes as deleted policies. Then they would come off the books. And in their place would go the policy that we're suggesting to you, policy 123. What happened is there used to be something, if you look at the old policy called Chapter 7, and Andrew, if you could look on the date there in your book there, what was the date?
Oh, 123?
Yeah, the old 123.
1989.
Obviously, that's not the state of the art anymore. And if you look at the legal reference at that time, it was Chapter 7. Chapter 7 used to be guidance services in the state board regulations. All of that when the state revised its regulations, was changed over to Chapter 12 under Student Rights and Responsibilities. And Chapter 12.4 and a series of other regulations under Chapter 12 are where all of the references to guidance services, student assistance teams are now posted. Our guiding regulations now for that had to be in the passage of your last strategic plan. All of that was really done. So if you were to look at the strategic plan, we have a student services plan embedded in the strategic plan. And that's what you see with the section 4.13 references. The section 4.13 references reference the state strategic planning process. So, Andrew, you were probably the only one on the board when the last strategic plan was passed. When you passed that, you basically passed what our student services plan is. This policy probably should have been done, and this is again why I keep saying we should have been doing this a long time ago. Mm-hmm. This has been on the books and been meaningless since you passed that strategic plan. So
okay, so the original 123 and 124 are going to be removed, and then this new 123 is going to go in its place.
And I would say, just for reference, if someone would want to see what we're doing to implement these required services, all of that is spelled out explicitly in our district strategic plan. I didn't bring that along tonight, but we actually went and researched it and found it, and it's all there. Things like, go ahead.
Including the administrative guidelines, the old ones that were in the book that went with 123 and 124.
Should we have this say revised 123/124? So
no, I think we just adopt. I think what we would do is we would just adopt this one. It's state adopted. This isn't really a revision. You're deleting the old ones and putting a new one in place. I'd have to ask Brian Subers how because this is the first time we're actually
either that or give it a new number altogether.
Right.
You know, don't.
So we'll work out the coding of it.
Okay.
But this is what it needs to say. For example, if you look under Chapter 12, Chapter 12 of State Board Regulations in a global sense is called Student Rights and Responsibilities. The State Board amended Chapter 12 to include student services. That's what you see here. They actually call it student services. Every district is required to, beyond the educational needs of the child, provide for developmental needs beyond education. Things that address, and it says right there in the regulation, that address their needs, which include counseling, psychological services, health services, home and school visitor, social work services that support students in addressing academic, behavioral health, personal, and social developmental issues. So this goes above and beyond the educational needs and brings in those other things that schools do to help kids succeed. So that's basically what this is saying in a very, very broad sense.
Okay. Any comments?
It's almost the same verbiage in the code.
Right. It's borrowed pretty much, as they say, ripped from the code.
Everybody good with this?
Yeah, I was fine with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that one.
Number 125, parental assurances.
We are retitling that, as you can see. It used to be curriculum review by parents, guardians, and students.
It used to be, or that's what it's going to be.
Assurances, right. And we felt that was misleading. So we retitled it what I just said, curriculum review by parents. I don't know if you have any questions on that.
Well, the only thing I noticed in here was on the old 125, there was a provision in there where it talked about parents' rights to excuse their kids from certain things. And I see you guys push that down into the administrative guidelines, which is fine. I don't have any issue with that.
Well, see, they changed that. It used to be a school district's discretion to evaluate your request not to do something. The state has taken that away from us.
Gotcha.
If the parent says now they don't want it, now they don't get it. It doesn't happen.
No, I get it. And so when I'm looking at now the administrative guideline, and you look under something like number 4, student exemptions from state assessments, which is on page 2, I guess. Yeah.
Yes.
And it says parents shall be informed in writing prior to the administration of a Pennsylvania assessment system test in the spring of the following, and then it starts giving you all these things. The notification will be through district newsletters and or billing calendars. So we are proactively doing that.
That's always posted on our
Okay.
website. If actually you go to our website, there's a testing schedule that's on there every year. It's rather extensive.
It's in the
It-
calendar too,
Is it?
district calendar.
Okay.
Okay, and then in number 5, it says the same thing about the HIV/AIDS instruction.
And that's
It says-
all by school code.
It says that the district shall publicize the detailed curriculum outlines. We are actually publishing detailed curriculum outlines of the courses and the materials and all that kind of stuff, so that when a teacher or a parent would get that and say, oh, they're going to talk about HIV/AIDS, or they're going to say, oh, it's about health, or it's about some, is it masked in some sort of general language. I just want to make sure that whatever we're doing follows the policy.
I would have to get more research. Bill, I don't know if you can comment on that
I
from the
don't
principal's
believe we're
level.
doing that.
No, we don't.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, if it says we're going to publicize it, then it doesn't say we might, it says we shall. So I just want to make sure that we're following through on that. And then I think the last thing on here, it says parents shall be advised of the required form or format for requesting exemption. So somehow we also have to be.
Well, that would be the form that's actually attached to this.
Well, we got to be advising them of the form,
Right.
right? So it's got to be getting to them somehow.
I think most of that is done via the web anymore. I don't know that we push it out, but it's something that we can take a look at.
Well, if it's on the web and we're telling them they got to look on the web, I don't know, maybe you need Brian to sort of say to you, well, what does that mean? That they're going to be informed? Does that mean you're just putting it on the website and that's constructive notice and therefore they're informed? Or do you actually need to send something to them and say, look,
That's a good point.
You got it, we've given it to you, you signed off on it, you're informed. And I just wouldn't want somebody coming back and litigating against the district because somehow we had I'm trying to think of the legal term for it, a constructive, active duty as opposed to a passive one in terms of notification. That was my only comment on 125.
I have a comment on 125. The policy, and I'm not sure if this is by state law, if only parents or guardians and students can review the curriculum, but according to this policy, I would not have the ability to look at the curriculum because I'm neither a parent nor am I a student. Is there a way we can expand this to all citizens, regardless of if they're a parent or if they're a student?
Well, I think I think if Connor, if you look under guidelines, did you read through that whole paragraph? It says, the rights granted by this policy are granted to parents/guardians of students enrolled in the school where the students are under the age of 18 and the students themselves when the student is 18 or over.
Okay, I'm looking at the actual policy. Oh, this wouldn't be relevant if there was no child in the school. Thinking about it further, I guess. I'm thinking more about if somebody had a question about the math curriculum, or if a member of the public wanted to inspect our math curriculum, but that doesn't really. Never mind.
No, but actually
I
the
see.
policy does address it. If you look at the bottom of section 2, it says requests for curriculum information shall be handled via open records request policy. So that would mean
Okay.
by
I'm a little bit
default.
concerned that is in the policy that says titled curriculum review by parents/guardians and students. Because if I were reading this and I saw that request for curriculum information should be handled by open record request policy, I wouldn't realize that that was for anybody because it's in the curriculum review by parents and students policy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I could.
Can we just add
Change it.
parents, guardians, students, and citizens,
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah, that sounds good.
district citizens, and district residents?
Yeah, that's good.
We'll also wind up changing the title of the AG to the same thing as the.
Yeah.
We didn't scratch that out.
Change that, yeah.
I just want to draw your attention to, on the AG, Section 3, student exemptions from specific instruction based on religious beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
That's, the stricken language was the old code language, where it gave districts discretion. that discretion's been removed. The language that we inserted is straight from state board regulations.
Okay.
Just for information. Just to be consistent. And if you notice, that actually changed. That one is 19 years old, so it obviously hasn't changed a whole lot, but it has changed very significantly. As a matter of fact, as I look here, Bill, we have to change paragraph 1 where there's a reference to Chapter 5 planned courses.
Yeah.
We need to fix that language. That needs to say Chapter 4 planned instruction.
Okay, anything else for 126? All right, before we get on to the...
we got to go we have to do 126.
125?
Yep.
And then 126 is independent study.
Since you were...
We just did one, okay, we're up to 126?
Yes.
There's not a whole lot of changes to this, especially the AGs are the same. Pretty much at the high school is where it takes place, and the students had to complete all the courses offered in a curricular domain before they would, let's say, like when we did away with, starting with French 5. For a couple of years, students, because there were only 2 of them, we didn't have a class of French 5. Following this guideline, students could, if the teacher was willing to do it, because it says that in here, because they don't have to do it, they can do an independent study, which they did with the French teacher, French 5, and they got their credit for that. So that's probably happening again with, I don't think we have German 5 anymore. That could be happening now in that foreign language. But they would finish a course of study. Let's say a student in years past came through and they did AP Calculus in 11th grade, and we didn't have a math course. I know years ago, Mrs. Traverso then did another math course for that student following these guidelines. So they haven't changed. Pretty much almost always, at least in my experience for 15 years, the teachers were willing to do that for the students, but they aren't contractually required to do it.
So on line 28, I was looking at it says the board shall approve each course of independent study and may designate the number of credits towards graduation to be awarded upon successful completion of each course, unless we don't approve any credits for that. What's the process for that then?
Probably with the annual course of studies booklet. Usually, and I don't know what your experience. In the course of studies booklet that you approve, or the planned instruction booklet, I guess we have to start calling it, there would probably be a page in there that says this is how you do independent study. So when you approve that, you're by proxy approving that process. I think if
this is the course, not the. So if somebody, I would imagine,
in the past,
right?
That was never done that way.
Yeah.
Go to the board.
Right. Well, and I don't have a problem with it going to the board. I guess I'm just sitting there. Obviously, the board's going to want the administration's advice as to whether to approve it or not approve it. I mean, you guys would come to us and say, yeah, we endorse this, and we want you to approve it. I don't have an issue with that. I guess the question is, it's never come before the board before. So going forward, if this is what the policy is going to read, then I'd imagine on some agendas we're going to start to see, some student, Joe Smith, wants to do an independent study on, German something.
Or if you want to strike out the word board and just leave that as administrative discretion to approve that, then you don't need to see them. There's nothing in the school code that says you as a board have to, it doesn't address board approval of independent study courses.
Right.
So there would be no affirmative obligation for a board to approve these. So if you want to step back to putting just the administration will approve them, we can do that. I think at the top,
I would imagine that the board would probably approve everything that the administration would bring forward to us, which is fine. But then again, there may be something where, I don't know, kid wants to do something crazy, and for some reason the administration said yes, and the board says, well, that doesn't seem like that's a reasonable substitute for a course. I don't know. I'm just
Well, I think there's a practical issue here. I wouldn't, in my day as a principal back when, there weren't many requests for independent study. I don't ever recall having taken them to a board for approval. There was administrative discretion to do that. So I don't know what your experience in your term as principal.
No, we never took it to the board. I don't know why we put that word in there.
how many independent studies do you guys typically get in a year?
Sometimes none. It happened a lot once, we stopped with starting with French in 8th grade and then German, and so we had a few more as kids were coming through the system and they already had that. Now we can get a student that transfers from another district and they had maybe a foreign language in 8th grade and they'll finish our 4 foreign languages by the end of 11th grade. And they may request level 5 of a foreign language and we don't have it. Mm-hmm. But we could offer it as an independent study as long as the teacher was willing to do it. And by the way, they just meet with that student generally once a week. The student, it's pretty much, as it says, independent study. They're on their own, but it is outlined by the teacher. And they meet with that student once a week to see how they're progressing. Now, if in foreign language, if it so happened that the student had a free last period of the day when foreign language is offered, level 4, they oftentimes would sit in the class of the level 4 foreign language, and they would be working on level 5 independently because
We used to do that.
They didn't have any other course
When I was at Twin Valley, we used to do that.
to go to. So why sit in the study hall when they could sit in the French class and hear level 4 again? Same thing with math. Those are the two that I can think of, math and foreign language in my 15 years.
I think what this does for a board and an administration, it allows for students who are enterprising that don't want to sit in a study hall. Maybe they'll go to a technology teacher and say, can you teach me something about advanced, they'll sit down and they'll actually draw up a nice plan, and it's not going to cost
Dr. Otto, on that point, I was wondering, how is this advertised to students? Because in my experience at the high school, I wasn't really aware of the independent study. Is it listed in the handbook, the student handbook at the beginning of the year? Is there an information sheet and guidance? I don't know how that.
I only know
advertise it.
I can only speak from my experience here or when I was principal. It used to be in our course of selection book that there were actually some very, very specific guidelines for it. I don't know if we've done that here or not.
Connor, I don't believe it was in our course selection guide, independent study. It would be brought up typically when by a guidance counselor if a student had completed, let's say, as the example I've been giving French 4, and they wanted to know, wow, I wish I could take the next level, and they would bring that up with the counselor. Then it wasn't advertised. It wasn't advertised.
Okay, is there a way we could advertise it? Because I know it's been used in the past for foreign language and for math and for maybe courses that used to exist but no longer exist. But like Dr. Otto just mentioned, if a student wants to create really a curriculum all by himself and with the guidance of a teacher, of course, I think that the student should have the knowledge that this policy is out there and they can do that. So if we can advertise this a little bit better, I think that would be helpful.
I think it's a wonderful thing for a school to have. I think almost every school that I've ever been associated with has some kind of independent study policy and opportunity. Basically, we wanted to put this down. It's already been in an administrative regulation. It's not, if you notice, there's very, very little guidance from the school code or from state board regulations. As a matter of fact, 4.4 that it references in the school state board regulations is the section that talks about graduation credits. That's the only connection. So this is really totally a discretionary policy at our level of a district.
I think maybe it would be helpful if we could just even print out copies of the policy and the administrative guidelines and put them in the guidance office. Just let a kid, if he's walking around, he wants to know if he sees this, maybe it piques his interest, his or her interest. They can grab the policy, they can read over it, maybe it's something they're interested in.
Well,
I may have taken advantage of this if I knew about it in high school, so I want others to be able to do that too.
Well, if you look at the administrative guideline, there is actually an independent study plan document that gets filled out. I think probably going forward, we could make sure this becomes part of the annual production of the Course of Studies handbook that has just a paragraph. If you desire to do independent study, please see your counselor, and then it gets moved up from there.
Yeah, I think if you have
That sounds like a good idea, yeah.
if you got it in the course book and it says independent studies and explains what it is, and there's a paragraph describing that and what the process would be, that should be enough notice to a student to say, hey, maybe that's something I'm going to try.
Right.
In anything, whether it's history or...
I have one other thing real quick. Mr. McEnwell mentioned how some teachers, it was really up to the teacher to decide whether or not they wanted to do the independent study with the student. Is there a way that we could have the administration say pretty much to a teacher, this is now part of your responsibilities, I want you to do this? And maybe, I wouldn't want a kid who maybe wants to take Spanish 5, but there's no Spanish 5 teacher who wants to work with him. I wouldn't want that kid not to be able to take the course or get the credit because no teacher wants to work with him. Is that possible at all, or is that...
I've never seen it implemented that way, and it probably, I'd have to explore that a little further. It could bring up potential contractual issues and assignment issues, time issues. So without saying yes or no, I'd have to research that question a little further.
All right.
I think my recollection from when I was in college, Connor, and even grad school was if you wanted to do an independent study, you had to approach the professor of that field in which, because they're going to be your advisor, so to speak, and get them to sign on and be willing to do that. And then you had to get it approved by the dean of that particular school before they would approve you moving forward with that work. So I don't know if it's why it should be any different here at a high school level, just prepping the kids for what they have to deal with at college.
I don't think it should be. I like the wording the way it was before when the administration approved it. I'm not crazy about the board approval.
We can strike that and put it back to administration.
Whenever it gets to an individual student, and then you talk about the board approving it, to
I
me,
agree.
that's a micromanagement issue that we have no business doing that.
We just
That's
wanted you
your
to be in the
job,
loop, so
you know.
we can pull back on that.
That's just my opinion. I'm not going to fight it either way.
Well, then let me say it
I just
to you
don't
this
think
way.
it's a bunch of
By
part-time
proxy,
guys,
when you
women
approve
and
the
guys.
course of studies, you've kind of
that.
approved this process. Not that you want to see each individual kid's dossier.
I don't think we should be there saying, well, look, I don't approve of French 5 for this
Right.
particular student. Like, what do we know?
Yeah, I agree. I was wondering, would it be possible, and I'm sure this would, I don't even know if this would happen, I doubt it would happen often, but would it be possible for there to be an appeal process where a student has the right to appeal to the board? Just mention that somewhere in here. Like, I'm fine with the administration approving it, but I wonder if there'd be a mechanism if maybe the student or parents believe it really is a valid course.
Well, I think, Connor, the appeal process is if, you go to a teacher and they say no, and you go to the principal and he says no, and then you go to the superintendent and he says no, that should probably pretty much be it.
Connor, the only thing that I'm concerned about is putting a teacher in a position where, you don't know that their caseload may already be pretty high. They may not really have the time to dedicate to doing this. And
oh, okay. I didn't mean that at all.
Oh,
I
okay.
meant for the terms of this course wasn't approved. I want to do this. I wrote up the plan. I have all my ideas down, but the principal doesn't want to go forward with it. I didn't know it could be appealed to the superintendent. I really thought that the building level administration was the end of the road. So if we can go to the superintendent, I think that helps a little bit.
I think for the most part, when you're going to do an independent study, just the very nature of it that it's independent, I can't imagine that someone that would offer to do an independent study with you wouldn't find a way to make it work. I mean, if you're going to do an independent study, it really doesn't have to follow the planned course. It can just be, maybe you want to do a semester study on Shakespeare, or one play where you say, you know what, for 10 weeks we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this and we're going to submit it. Where I think the administration needs discretion is to say this, and this is crucial because I think the policy addresses it. What grade are you going to get? Is that grade actually going to be factored? Are you going to get credit for it? Yes or no? Because that could be a yes or no. You might just do it for fun. And the third thing is it going to get calculated into your GPA, which is crucial when kids are worrying about what class rank is. So those are all questions that I think are best answered by the building administration and out of the hands of the board.
One question.
All right, yeah, maybe my understanding of what independent study was just a little bit confused. So I'm glad we had this discussion because it really cleared up my
Right, because if you're taking French 5 and you get a straight A in French 5, and then we're going to say, well, you know, we're going to put that in the GPA, then someone could make the argument, well, why wasn't I allowed to do that? And their GPA is higher than mine because they took all these independent study courses. Now that might sound radical, but that could happen.
My interpretation of independent study was that it was much more about the course, but how Mr. Basil worded it made it seem like it was an opportunity for a student to interact with a teacher and to get not only learn the course, but get that teacher's expertise. And my interpretation didn't really feature the teacher as much, but if that is how it is, and I believe it is now after this discussion, I do believe that this would be the best way forward, what you're mentioning.
My only question about this, do you have to use a Daniel Boone teacher to do an independent study, or are you allowed to go to someone else to do the independent study for you? Like say German 5, someone couldn't find anyone to do German 5 in Daniel Boone, but they could.
I would be hesitant to give credit for somebody once. I think we run into legal issues then we're endorsing someone to go sit with somebody and do something that we can't monitor. Mm-hmm. That would be a problem for me. I don't know about the rest of you. That just would seem to be fraught with all kinds of issues.
Okay.
Not that I don't trust other individuals to do that, but it's like this texting policy that we're going to talk about later. We've lost containment when we do that, and I have a concern to that.
This wasn't sure, like the way this was written. I thought, well, the teacher here is too overloaded. Why can't they go to another school?
Well, this another school, that's a different issue. But another individual where they say, well, you know, we're going to meet you Tuesday nights at my house, and we sanctioned it.
But I would say if it was another school, say they went to Boyertown, and the
Boyertown would send us a bill. Trust me.
Well,
like any other district would.
Just wondered if they're that, inclined to want to do an independent study and determined to do one, how would they get it done if they wanted to do it?
Yeah, I would think they would have to pretty much, the way we're structured, tap one of our teachers to do that. Outside of that, they could just do a self program, really just kind of do it on their own, under nobody's guidance but their own, which is really the purest form of education. So that's all the policies that we have to bring forward. We'll make the edits that you've talked about.
I just have one thing that I wanted to bring up, and this is probably...
Which policy?
The athletic one that we changed the name to.
Interscholastic.
Interscholastic athletic one. I just... How many courses you're allowed to be failing?
Well, that's been debated at many board meetings.
It's the only thing that still sticks in my head of, are we shortchanging our students by allowing them to be failing? I think it was almost 2 courses.
More than one major subject and one minor
Mr.
subject.
McElwell and I anticipated this question, and I told Bill to be prepared. So
I just had this is just, I don't know, this doesn't settle with me on
my
what we're
recollection
allowing
is
them
when
to
you
fail.
first look at it, you says failing, but when you first read this, my impression was you failed the course for the year. And I think what came up in the discussion at the board level when this was raised, I don't know whether it was a year ago,
a couple times,
2 years ago, it came
couple
up.
times.
Where if you failed a quiz, technically you're failing that course. And so for 1 week, you could be in a situation where you are not meeting academic eligibility requirements, but within a week later, you take another quiz or something else happens and your grade improves, and now you're eligible again. So it's not a be-all, end-all. So there has to be, and so many students could fall within that.
That's why we have to do it weekly.
There's more latitude there in terms of the number of courses where you could be failing at any one time.
And I wasn't sure, does failing mean a full flat F or a D? To me, failing is anything
I'm going to let
under C.
Mr. McElwell answer those questions.
It's an F. Failing is an F. Yes. And 60, it would be...
whatever the failing threshold is.
Anything below 64 below is an F. So
I just have a hard time stomaching allowing students to stay at an F and still be able to...
But as Mr. Basil just said, see, oftentimes early in a quarter, there could be, they didn't turn in a homework assignment, not even a quiz. Well, now they have an F. Now they're off of the team for a week. They can't be
out of competition.
Out of competition. If they have The following week, they're also, they're immature and they don't do the second assignment. And this is usually at the beginning of the school year. Now they have it for 2 weeks. Now they can't even practice. Really, research has shown that once they're off the team, now their grades really take a dive because they really want to be on that sport, and that sport creates a lot of motivation for them. Even though some of them, because of their immaturity and everything, they don't study for their first quizzes or do their homework. It's really important that. I know it may seem like we don't have high standards, but actually we go a step beyond the PIAA. If you look at the first sentence of letter B, student eligibility shall be determined quarter to date and or year to date. PIAA doesn't have both of those. I believe it's just, and it's been a while, I believe it's just quarter to date. But the example I would always
Which would mean in some school districts, your football team could technically all be failing. And if you only use the PIAA, you won't find that out until the season's over. So those kids have played all season, and we're competing against schools. We're already putting ourselves at an academic disadvantage by raising our standards, but it lowers we might lose a couple kids in some competitions. Which is, that's okay. We have a higher bar.
It's year to date, I believe, in PIAA. So that let's take a spring athlete. They have a 90 average in a course, and they decide they're going to goof off in the fourth quarter. So they want to fail. They don't do any work. They're failing the fourth quarter, but they're still passing for the year. And that's why we have in there quarter to date. So in the fourth quarter, if a track athlete, a baseball player, other spring sports, if they decide they're, especially a senior, I'm graduating, I got this, I'm not going to work the fourth quarter, but they want to run track, they're going to be motivated to stay eligible because it's quarter to date. Now they could still fail one, but they can't just blow off all their courses in the spring sport in the fourth quarter.
I know that the Curriculum Instruction Committee actually looked at the numbers.
We did some data on this.
How many students are actually dropping into these issues? And it was like, it was like in the single digits at a time. So it wasn't even like we had a majority of our students where this was, we have all these kids that are failing classes and it's a problem. I mean, my first blush when this came up was, oh my gosh, how dare they be failing so many classes, and we got to do something about it. And then after all the numbers came out, it sort of explained to me how the process works. I realized that it looks worse than it is.
Seeing it firsthand with the kids, there are some kids that really struggle academically, but they're very, very successful, and they get that confidence from playing on sports fields. And when they have that success, it really is a motivator. When you can tell a kid, look, your score's right here, you can really see that be what motivates them, because sometimes it's not other avenues that you can get to them, but that is one way to motivate them.
I guess one of my questions was, if we know they're failing and they've gotten an F, do we take another step? Like, I know when I was in school, you failed, you had detention until your grade came up, and you had to study. Do we have any provisions in here that when a student is failing, if that's his motivation to be back on the court, do we actually pull them aside somewhere and say, okay, you're going to be in an extra study hall to study, or you have to do something beyond to get your grade up? Like, I know I had to be in detention if my grade was not sufficient to run track.
The middle school football team, they have all study hall.
You can have some study groups. You can't really discipline a child for flunking your class.
Well, here at the high school, I know, at least unofficially, a lot of coaches.
Yeah.
Coaches kind of police their ranks. It's kind of an unwritten thing. I mean, it's an expectation, but it's not a policy. That if the coaches try to the extent that they can encourage good study habits, I don't know that anything you could write would help improve that situation. We can't do detentions for them. You can't explicitly. School. Yeah, you can't.
We had detention for everything.
And there was times in public schools when we used to do that too. But I think you have to be careful how you couch that in writing, at least.
It just looked like they could fail 2 classes, 1 major, 1 minor, and still be able to play, or 2 minors. It's just like, wow.
I think the
Without
data
having
show
something extra
that
to
the
do to
policy's
help.
doing what it's intended to do. I think it's, I'd have to rely on you for how many, over the years, how many athletes are typically ineligible in a given.
We looked at this. I don't
Yeah, I
remember
don't
the
have
exact
that.
numbers, but we looked at it.
It's small.
It was reported out. It was a small number, and I think what we decided was if you had made that like one course, if you were just failing one course, when you have one bad quiz, you're off the team. You know what I mean? Until you get an opportunity to make it up at some point in time because of the way Section B is written.
Right.
And so it was like, okay, you can review less, or you got to provide a little bit more latitude in terms of what's going on there. So
That's another area where I feel like you got to be careful that you're not trying to micromanage at a board level. Let these folks do what they know motivates
I would tell you,
that
I think
particular
the policy is
student.
about where it needs to be. How long have you been using this one?
More than my 15 years as principal. So this has been in place here for a long time.
I guess I was just thinking of the student. If they're struggling and they're struggling, how are we really taking care of that student to make sure that they get through the education part of it and be a good athlete at the same time?
I think in fairness, there's been some dissent to this policy since I've been here. But I think because of the dissent that we heard, we went and investigated it and found out it's actually pretty good.
Okay.
Like I said, I know I've had football players in my classroom after school for tutoring, not because they necessarily wanted to be there, but because they were ineligible, couldn't practice, and their coach said, you can't be on the field, you go get help in math, because that's the grade that, that's one of the classes they are not doing well in.
And that's what I wanted to hear. I was hoping that
But the
was something we
coaches
are
taking
doing
care
for
of that,
them.
because number one, they know the kids and they can look at them and tell them you're going to do this, and number two, they get that list every week of ineligible kids, or even kids who are in danger of being ineligible.
Okay,
So
that's good to know.
I think that's kind of a code with coaches. I can remember back to my days when I'd coach and we'd talk to kids. We'd say, don't come in here telling me that you're flunking a class and you can't wrestle. That's not what I want to hear. Make yourself eligible. I mean, and even though I wasn't a math teacher, I said, well, go do what you need to do so you pass it. So you try to give them those pep talks and make sure that because you want them to be part of the team.
Okay.
All right, great. We're moving on to these 2 policies under extended review. Before that, I have one question. I have in my notes, Dr. Otto, and I honestly don't remember the details of this note, but I have in my note that last meeting when we reviewed policy 122, postseason event competitions, I had a note that we would continue to review that at the next meeting.
yeah.
Where do we stand with that policy? Why did I say that? I don't even
Because,
remember why I
in
said that.
in our preparation, we didn't even.
I didn't catch that. 122. What part?
Well, I think with
about
122, this
postseason
is postseason competition and activities, and there was a whole bunch of things that we were talking about on there, which was somehow reserving the right for the board to define what a season is.
Oh, right.
And we were talking about how it really only... the initial blush was this was athletic season as opposed to all activities, so we had agreed we're going to change it from athletics to include activities, i.e. you're wrapping your arms around the marching band as well. And I think also on there...
You know what? We just actually, we'll have to defer that one again. So just,
Okay.
And then there was even more discussion...
That was just an oversight.
There was more discussion on the athletic... on the AGs, the administrative...
Yeah, so I found it now. I have some wording here. We
were talking about parades
resurrected.
and,
That's an oversight.
all kinds of stuff.
That was a fumble.
I think
So,
whether
next week-
TSA was
We'll add it to the
included in
agenda
that,
for next
and-
month.
Well, we're probably not going to do something in December.
Well, I mean,
for the workshop, but our
next meeting.
next meeting.
We'll add it to the...
I thought we did decide that the band was the entire year.
Yeah, well, I think we did, but I think it had to be,
I think it
had to be
disappeared.
changed. There was no change. I mean, like, we made the edits while we were discussing things, but obviously no second version came up. And then we were also talking about, like, clubs like TSA and some other things where we were trying to decide what that season was, too. So,
Okay.
those are just from my notes. So, I had the same question, Frank. I had in there, like, what happened to 122? So.
Yeah, I actually found it in my last month's packet here.
Okay. The other thing, just as a reminder, some comments came up again at the last meeting. If at some point you can assemble a list of all the policies that
That's been done.
Oh, we do have that?
Just did that.
Okay.
That's been done.
And I got it today.
Okay, I didn't catch up to
Sent it
that.
today.
So you might have gotten it. So this just
Just
talks about.
for, and I actually spoke to Andrew about this today. There is a, if you go to the policy link, we have, if you look at anything that has the date on it past April 2012, that's when we started this committee.
Okay.
So I can walk you through
All
this
right.
committee.
Okay. I'll just.
But until we finally got some approved and done, remember we started and we didn't get anything to the board. I think it's starting until April.
Okay. And I think as a longer term goal, I just want to keep repeating it at each meeting so it stays on our radar. As a longer term goal, I think we're hoping to get all these policies put into a single PDF.
We're starting, what I wanted to do, when a series is done, we'll put that whole series in. I don't think it serves any purpose to have the ones that we're going to have to, because that's a laborious process.
Yeah, that's why I said it's a
So
longer term issue.
The
But I just want to keep it on the radar.
000 is done that way now. The 100s are done that way, even though we're not done with them. We're almost done with them.
Okay.
So then once we get into the 200s and start doing that, then we'll post them that way and go through that. We'll just do them one at a time.
Okay. Policy 118, 120. Okay, that's it for those last notes from the last meeting. So now we're on policy 006, public participation.
Yeah, what we wanted to do was just, this one's been kind of dangling out there. We had just revised this one, but this is the issue that came up with how somebody gets something on the agenda. This is really kind of in your domain as a board as to what you would like to see. So if you go, I think the question revolved around section 6 and 7 of that policy. I think the rest of it is okay. But if you remember the little bit of discussion we had on how, quote, someone gets something on the agenda. If you want to just leave this language the way it is.
I noticed actually something when I was looking at this. So section 6, which talks about special meetings, needs to be amended anyways because it's not quite what the code requires. So the code, as I have it, says the president on line 36 shall call a special meeting upon the presentation of requests in writing of 3 school directors. Ours says may.
Well, that was reviewed by Brian. So
Yeah, I mean, the code, well, I've got this version of the code here. I don't know if it's changed.
No. Then
But
if you found it in there.
Yeah, it says shall. There's a big difference between may and shall. So
I'll run that by Brian, make sure.
if 3 members of a committee say we want to have a meeting, the board president does not have any discretion in that. They have to hold a meeting.
All right.
And number 2, it also says the president may call special meetings at any time. I think that language should also be included.
Maybe that's what that was, and it got mixed up with that. Okay.
Right. So I think those 2 things need to be edited there. In terms of...
So the president may call any meeting at any time.
Well, no, it says the president may call a special meeting at any time, and then it says the second sentence is the president shall call a special meeting upon the presentation of requests in writing of 3 school
Gotcha.
directors.
Okay. So if you get a request from 3 people, then you're obligated. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if 3 committee members say or
Okay.
board members say we need a special meeting, there's no...
No discretion.
Yeah, you
Okay.
have to have it.
I'll bring that up with Brian. Connor said he had an 8:30 deadline, by the way.
I'm still here.
No, we know that. It's not 8:30 yet.
I mean, I looked at this, and my impression was this. I mean, clearly, Section 7 talks about how any resident or taxpayer of the district, president of a meeting, may address the board. And period. And it doesn't discriminate between. It says a meeting of the board. It doesn't say a board meeting, committee of the whole meeting. It doesn't say a voting meeting. It says a meeting of the board. I'm assuming that also includes budget workshops or something else where we have the full board
I would say
present.
meeting is a meeting. When
Right.
you're
And
there, it's a
if you
meeting.
recall, last year we had a budget workshop where board members did not want to take public comment, and we got blasted for it. And
Right.
that's a violation of this policy. It says we have to allow an opportunity for the public to comment at a public meeting. So I just thought...
I think what is crucial is that you can, and this is just me interpreting it, you can determine the process by which that happens.
Absolutely, and we lay out a process for
Okay.
it. You know, each resident will have 3 minutes and
Right.
blah, blah, blah.
Right.
We lay that out here. But I just want to make sure that the board, when we discuss this, is aware that it's not a question of will you take public comment or not when you have a full assembly of the board? According to this policy, you shall.
Right.
Because it's an enumerated right to the taxpayer to be able to address the board.
Right.
The other thing on here I thought was, if somebody just wants to get up and address the board, we set aside certain times to do that, and we set aside our 3 minutes. But if somebody wants to address the board about a specific issue, I think, there's a process for creating an agenda. And we say that the superintendent, I forget which policy it is, creates the agenda with the cooperation of the board president and secretary. And I think that's
not an 006.
That's an 004, I think.
Right.
And so
maybe it needs to be addressed there.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Look, we have a process for putting an agenda together, and if a member of the public wants to be put on the agenda, or a group wants to be put on the agenda to discuss something in front of the whole board, well then, if the two officers and the superintendent think that should happen, then it becomes an agenda item.
Right.
Because this policy says you're limited to 3 minutes no matter what the issue is. And so either you're going to follow the policy or not, but I think if someone's on the agenda, then you're actually saying, look, we're setting aside time as part of our meeting to discuss this issue, and we're going to use whatever time is required to discuss it. Otherwise,
I'd have to go back and look at 004 and see how.
Well, 004, that's all it says about agendas. Okay. It just says that the superintendent shall.
Wouldn't that be the place, though, to address it if you want to? Remember, we still have that dangling issue of how just somebody could bring something forward to be placed on the agenda. That was the essential question.
I think another issue is communicating it to the public so they know what the process is.
Correct.
They don't come to a committee of the whole and they need more than 3 minutes and they're told, oh, you have to call the superintendent's office and get on the agenda. Somehow that can be put out there so they know how to get on the agenda or what the process is to get on the agenda.
Maybe it's not 4, maybe it's 5.
I'm not so sure this 006 is the place to do that.
Yeah.
This is more about public participation while you're at the meeting.
Isn't there a thing about public participation like in the 600s or 500 much later on in our?
No. Mm-mm. No, that's like complaint process and things like that.
Oh, right, complaint process.
We can go back. I don't think it's a pressing matter. We can go back and look at it.
I looked at it why would we treat it any differently than, let's say, a municipality would or the county? I mean, you want to get on an agenda in front of a township or a borough, you call up the township manager or the secretary and say, hey, I want to discuss X, Y, and Z. I want to be put on the agenda. And they say, well, look, we don't have any room on the agenda for the next meeting, but we got room on this month's agenda that you can be on. And they put it on there. And if the supervisors or the borough council says, no, that's not the place for this, we're not going to discuss it, then they have the right to strike it from the agenda.
Right.
And then the township manager usually will communicate that back to the applicant to say, hey, look, we're not putting you on the agenda.
And at minimum, you could never stop anybody from getting their 3 minutes and just coming to the meeting. Anybody could technically bring anything forward during the public participation portion. You would just have the right then, if it's not on the agenda, to say at the end of 3 minutes, thank you very much, we'll take that under consideration.
If it doesn't fit on one of the agendas, you can always at least tell them to come to a committee meeting. At least if they called, you didn't want them on the board agenda, you could at least come to
Well, I think sometimes, and in the case of the individual that we had come forward to the board, they were actually asking you as a board to weigh in on something as a board. It would have been inappropriate for them to come to a committee meeting. It wouldn't have meant anything to them.
Mm-hmm. Well, you want to avoid somebody coming to a meeting to discuss a very
singular
personal
topic.
Issue regarding their student. Their child's not informed for
right.
that. So,
well, that and then you would never put that on the agenda. You would say that's personnel, or it's not subject to the sunshine. It doesn't have to be discussed out in public.
I mean, maybe we're the wrong 3 people to be sitting here talking about it because, quite frankly, I think the way we have it is fine. And if somebody has an issue where, like in the instance of that one gentleman who wanted to discuss something and get an answer from the board, he certainly wasn't going to get it in 3 minutes. And,
correct.
And so putting him on the agenda was where, there was a disagreement between, myself and the board secretary. and hence the reason for the discussion. But I think it's unfair to a resident or a taxpayer who has an issue that can't be resolved at the superintendent level, and the board is the last method of appeal, that they're only given 3 minutes to discuss whatever the problem is.
Well, it reminds
I mean,
me
I think that's
of
ridiculous.
when I first got on the board, when the group from Blackwood wanted to address the board about
Taxes.
how to, what we were trying to avoid, assessment appeals or something like that.
And litigation and all kinds of.
So, I mean, it's things like that I think, had they been placed on the agenda, they probably could have been handled in a much more organized fashion.
Even we had the issue with last February up at the high school with the racism and everything
Right.
else going on. Yet, people who are going to speak for 10 minutes, whether you want them to be quiet or not, and adhere to the 3-minute rule, they're just not going to listen to it. So would that have been better served that we just put that on the agenda and said, hey, we're going to have an opportunity for folks to get up and talk about this issue, and we'll discuss it until,
I would just, I think you, as a board, we should go back and wherever
maybe
that
we just need an administrative guideline
that
in
agenda,
terms of
I think we can
agenda
put it right in
items.
the policy when we can go back and look at the agenda development section, and I think it would be best put in there, and then notify the public of what that process is.
I mean, maybe you guys take a look and see what other school
Yeah,
districts
we'll go
do.
back and look at it. Okay. But this 006, I want to run that other technical issue that you brought up by
Yeah, I
Susan to
think
make sure
that's-
that gets changed. All right, that's all we have on that one.
All right, on to 829, staff-student communication.
I tried to brainstorm my way through this. I'll just tell you since the last
Oh, you know what,
meeting-
Doctor, I had a quick question.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, before we skip, sorry, Frank. On 006, page 4 of 9, line 28, it's talking about how you need, the following actions require affirmative votes of 2/3 of the full number of school directors. And then as you go down to line 28, it says adopt, amend, or repeal a board procedure. Is that board policy, or what are they talking about in terms of the procedure? So we're talking about 2/3 vote to approve or change.
I think if you change anything in here, in any of your 000 policies,
Is that a procedure? Like, it doesn't, what is a procedure versus a policy, I guess is what
I'd have to look at
question is.
Article 111, Section 1-8 to understand that. That's beyond my memory.
Well, then I'm just sitting there thinking, if they're talking about policies, well, we got to be mindful that we've got 6 people voting in favor of a policy versus, otherwise the policy doesn't pass.
That's a good point. I'll check that one out.
Just the 00s, not all policies.
Well,
No, makes a good point.
I think it refers to all policies, or all
We need a
procedures.
It says
definition of the word
board
procedure.
procedure.
My understanding of it is
that what
that
you
anything in
wanna
the 000 section
Right.
needs to have a 6 votes to pass.
Right,
okay.
There are also some other things that need to have 6 votes.
Yeah, well, there's a
And-
whole list.
Yeah, I think they're listed in there.
Right, yeah, they're all listed, but Mr. Basil's trying to interpret number 10 in that list.
I just want to make sure I understood what it was and that we were doing it. That's all.
I'll just ask Mr. Supers.
And then the last thing on here, Section 9 talks about minutes, and obviously we know what the Sunshine Law requires in terms of minutes. But Section 9 just talks about open meetings of the board. And then when you get down to Section 14, we talk about committees. Well, those aren't the entire board, but it doesn't mention anything in here about keeping minutes. And remember, we had this issue before where committees weren't keeping minutes, or they were, but they were only keeping, I forget what it was, 3 things in terms
Who was
of
there?
who was
met,
there, what
and
time
the
it
agenda.
started, and what time it ended, and,
Right.
and that was it. So I don't know whether you just copy what's in Section 9 and you put it down below under Section 14 that, as a reminder to future boards that you need to be holding, keeping minutes of your committee meetings as well.
You don't,
And-
if you want to do that, you're doing it above and beyond. You don't have an obligation under law to keep minutes from a committee meeting.
You do.
I thought that was the discussion we came.
No, that wasn't. It's a sunshine law issue. Was that because it's a public meeting, you are
But the
required
minutes,
to have
yeah,
minutes.
you're right. But the minutes don't have to be as
They don't have to be as
specific.
specific as the ones above.
Right.
But I'm just saying that whatever the requirement of the sunshine law is, I think we need to have it under section 14.
Something specifically I'd like to bring up in that regard. According to, I believe, the Sunshine Law for full board meetings, you need to copy down the names of everybody who gives testimony in front of the board. Is that required at committees too? Because we haven't been doing that.
The committee is required. The requirements were you had to according to the sunshine law, as I recall, it was you had to have when the meeting started, when the meeting stopped, who was there, and what the subject matter of the meeting was. Period. And that
Does
was
the
it.
who was there part cover the public as well?
To the best of your ability, yes.
Okay.
And it's a good faith effort. You can't necessarily, and that's why usually at committee meetings, we pass a piece of paper around to all the people that are at the meeting so that they sign their name and their address, and that gets
That gets entered
minutes.
into the minutes as who was present.
Correct. Which we
Did
probably
we
need
do
to
that
do
this
here.
time?
So.
Which we do.
Did you send that one around?
No, I didn't send one around.
So we'll
As soon
do
as I
that
got here,
too.
we started.
But because remember, one board member's like, well, okay, if I have
do
to keep
remember that.
minutes,
I remember
then
Suber's-
I'm just going to do the bare minimum.
Right.
It was all that other.
I do remember that, and I think it was because he said that was because Suber said, here's all you need to keep.
Right. But we do have to keep something because otherwise it's a violation of the sunshine law. So
Well-
that's all I'm saying is it's vague here in committee meetings. It doesn't even mention that you have to keep minutes. I just thought it'd be appropriate that we put that.
What did you want to see put down in there?
Whatever the sunshine law requirements are, that, committee meetings, just like we have above, that minutes shall be kept as part of the meeting, and these are the 3 requirements. I have Brian, I guess, pipe in with that.
Yeah, I'll have him.
The only other thing I saw here was, it says that committee meetings may be called at any time by the committee chairperson or when requested to do so by the majority of committee members. Well, if you have 4 people on a committee, is 2 a majority?
No. I would say majority means more than half. Whenever you're looking at the word majority, I think any dictionary would say more than half.
And if you have 3 people, then it's 2. So the question is, and we've had this issue before where we had 4 people on the board, on a committee, and 2 said yes and 2 said no, and then we weren't getting any meetings.
Then I think by default you don't have a majority, and if you would want to see that change, you'd have to change the reason. You'd have to say here, you'd have to change this wording, because I don't think there's
That's
any.
my point, is as a committee, do we want to recommend that the number be 2?
Well, that's I can run a committee meeting with 2. It doesn't matter to me.
Well, we do it with-
I'm ex officio, so you can't count me as a board
when
member.
you have committees of 3, we do it with 2 people.
Correct.
And we've done it in committees where we've had 4 and we've only had 2 people. So I guess I'm just bringing it up that 2
You
is
might
not a
want to change the
majority.
wording. You might, instead of using the word majority,
Just say 2. Or
a minimum of 2 members need to be present to run a committee meeting. That's it. You just change the wording.
that's what I'm suggesting. And
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Because we've actually done that.
Yes, many times, yeah. Okay, so I guess now we can get to the nitty-gritty.
Okay. Back to 829.
Putting out my attendance roster here. Thank you. Very, very rudimentary, but it gets the job done.
I usually have something printed out that I pass. I forgot to print it out.
All right, in an attempt to,
Just name?
Name and probably your address.
we don't need addresses, just, we've
Sure?
never taken addresses for,
Yeah.
Okay.
especially if they're not entering comment. And we've never required
Oh,
addresses
you're
at
right,
committee
you're right,
meetings.
we've never done that, right.
In an attempt to find a middle ground here with meeting our oversight, what I believe is what we've consistently said is to ensure the safety of our students to the maximum extent possible, and still be realistic about how far our influence can reach. I've taken a pass at trying to write what I believe would be a reasonable circumstance under which staff would be allowed to communicate via text/cell phones under limited circumstances. I still believe that limited circumstance needs to occur on a district-owned cell phone initiated from our end. whose phone is on the other end is not of consequence to me. But to allow that to happen, does everyone have a copy? Is that in the, it's out there? That we would come up with, basically, in short discussion, something called a parental waiver. It would put the onus on the parent to allow that to happen. Because what has happened is, as we've tried to micromanage this whole process, is that we can't find a technological solution that's a 100% airtight situation where a phone number that would be used could be guarded. I don't think there's an inexpensive technology solution to shielding numbers or, having some other form of communication. So the waiver would allow us, and I didn't do a waiver yet, the actual waiver, what it would look like, the document, until if we don't agree with the concept, then a waiver would be superfluous. So a long story short, it would just be a signed, I'm going to read from the paper here, a signed parental waiver that would hold harmless the district in the event of any future inappropriate or unwarranted communication. The waiver would need to be signed by the parent or guardian and in the district's possession prior to any contact and must be secured for each event or activity. And what that waiver would include would be, we would actually have that waiver. This is the number that you would communicate with. We would have a bank of, approved district cell phones that could be used for communication, which would allow the parent on the other end, if they could keep that as a record to say, this is the phone number that I should be seeing on my cell phone from the district. And it would not guard against us having their phone number because it wouldn't shield it. That's still the Achilles heel in this system. But at the end of the day, I think that there would probably be such a limited use of this because I don't think it's not selling out the policy in that we're still saying no texting on personal communication devices between teachers and students. On district-owned, we're creating a very, very limited niche for it to happen, and I think protecting it about as much as we can probably protect it without turning into having just to need one person to go around and monitor this whole thing all the time.
My only comment is that I'll throw out all my thoughts, on both sides of this issue. What is it we're trying to accomplish? And, are we creating a process that really isn't helping do what we're trying to accomplish? For example, to me, the only benefit, bless you, of having a district phone, the only benefit is to shield the teacher's phone number so that the student doesn't have the teacher's phone number, but it doesn't do you any other good for anything else. It's like a waste of time. It's adding this extra process that really is for no specific reason that we're trying to accomplish. All I think we're trying to do here is to say, look, there is no circumstance that this school district stands behind that says...
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm going to need to get going. I'm not a huge fan of the waiver idea. That's just my gut reaction. I'm sorry I have to go now.
Go ahead.
All right, talk
Thanks.
to you later.
See you, Connor.
Bye.
All I'm wanting in my mind is to say there's nothing that we endorse as a school district that says a teacher and a student need to communicate in order to get the job done that's got to get done. There's no need that the school district is saying it has to be there. If you do it, then you do it outside anything that the school district is allowing you to do, because we're saying you do not need to communicate that way. Now, if there's a special event and the parents sign waivers saying, listen, I know my student and the teachers are going to communicate, at this event and I'm okay with it, then good, that's it. But why throw in a district-owned cell phone and all this other stuff? I don't understand what that's helping. For us, we just want to make sure that we've got it written clear and concise that you will be in violation if we find out that a teacher and a student are communicating just on a regular basis for no good reason other than, hey, how you doing today and whatever. We just want to make it clear. I mean, we can't stop people from... I'm sorry?
What defines a good reason?
A good reason is if you're... this
That's,
is what...
I think, what's got everybody very nervous.
This
is this a good reason? Is this not a good reason?
I'll give you my answer. I don't know whatever the answer of this committee is, but my answer is if you're away on a special event and you need to communicate with these kids, make sure they're safe, make sure you got them under control, they show up where they need to show up, and it's another mechanism. It's a mechanism we didn't have years ago. Now you have it, and you can't deny that we have it. And they try to pretend we don't have it, and it's not going to work.
You're saying, forget the district phone part, but a waiver's okay.
I'm just asking, to me, we've got to do everything for a reason. And I don't understand what the reason of that phone is, other than protecting the teacher's phone number. So the student never gets the teacher's phone number. But it doesn't protect the student.
What it does, though, is the reason I say a district phone is that it allows us to, if there is something inappropriate, we control that device.
But how do you see it?
We would get it back.
But that can be eliminated. That text can be
eliminated. Yes, and to be quite honest with you, we could say to someone, you're not supposed to do that, and then at some point you might not be able to control that. At some point you do lose control. You're going to try to rely on, the fact that you said we want to, because this is what I would say.
Well, by the way, if you eliminate a text on a phone, you can call your phone company, and I can get every text I've ever done in the past 5 years.
But not the specifics of what that text says.
Yes, you can.
You have to subpoena that information.
Not if we own the phone. That's my point. If it's our phone.
If I own my child's phone, I cannot get their records of what has been texted.
But if you're my advisor and you go to the TSA, which has been the thing here, and I say to the TSA advisor, you're giving me that phone back now. Either if you eliminated all of them, and I don't need a subpoena to go get my own information. But if I ask them for their phone, I'm going to have to get a subpoena.
Okay, I think perhaps you might be incorrect because that's not the information that I've received from an administrative person at the school district, is the fact that I own my child's phone. I can see the printout of every single phone number they've ever texted.
Correct.
I cannot get access. I own the phone. But it doesn't mean I can get specific printouts of what exactly was text stroke by stroke.
Yeah,
that was my understanding.
Yeah, I would find, I'm not going to debate with you because I don't know. So I'm just making the assumption that if I'm just going to take my phone here, if I'm texting with my kids and I own this phone, what's on my phone, I should be able to get what's on my own phone.
I understand that. And that was my point, what I was trying to make. Look, I own my kid's phone. Why can't I get their information? Why can't I see that? Software has to be installed into that phone, which is a whole other issue.
Right.
And if it could be addressed, I know that my kids have always, anytime they've had an issue with school, communicated through email. They've never had teachers' numbers, never communicated with any of their teachers whatsoever. My issue comes into effect when you're dealing with a coach, because the majority of the coaches are not teachers here. Teachers don't have access to the athletes and or band members. Band members athletes don't have access to the coaches.
Correct.
But the coaches and the athletes can all have emails, and they can communicate via email.
My child does not come home after school.
That doesn't stop your child from emailing the coach.
I just said my child does not come home from school.
Okay, we have computers here at school.
I'm not saying they're staying here. My kid's not here. They're elsewhere. I'm trying to raise a child who I'm putting out into society. So if I'm saying, absolutely, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, and you need the direction of an adult, I don't see why putting a policy into place is going to allow or prevent somebody from circumventing that
Nothing
issue.
prevents anybody from circumventing a policy that puts in place. I think my issue is, as Frank brought it up, is what's the purpose of the policy, right? Okay, so the purpose of the policy is the health, safety, and welfare of the students. All the students, not just 18-year-olds, but 5-year-olds, 10-year-olds. I know kids that are 9 and they have their own cell phones, okay? So we have to have a policy in place that shields the children from being taken advantage of, okay? And that's the way I look at it. And so what's the purpose of it? Well, the purpose of it, as far as I'm concerned, is any school activity, whether it's happening here on campus or it's a sports event or it's a TSA event or something else, it is being facilitated by this institution, right? We've encouraged our students to go participate in these events. We sponsor these events. We're liable for those students while they're at those events. We hire people to go represent these students and take care of them while they're there. We provide transportation. We do all kinds of things, all right? And then to sit there and say, okay, well, we're going to make sure now that we're going to the only way you're going to communicate, we're going to facilitate the distribution of private phone numbers and email addresses so that those parties can communicate. We've now opened up a liability and a risk to those students. That someone's going to now take their email, the private email addresses, or going to take their private phone numbers and start communicating with them via those private numbers after that event at some other point in time and take advantage of it. I've spent a lot of time speaking to different individuals, counselors at other school districts, police officers, detectives, DAs, okay, that I know across the country. I pulled down article after article after article off the internet. All these I won't say all of them, the majority of these relationships start off with sexting and emails. That's where it starts off. And it goes from there into something a lot more severe. And I would encourage this committee, or maybe the board, to bring in the DA from Berks County and hear their thoughts. On their website, I mean, I pulled it down. They talk about things that we should and shouldn't be doing. And on there is, teachers should avoid being alone with students, including private lessons and tutoring. Texting or social networks should be discouraged.
Absolutely. We have
So
policies saying
if
that
we're-
these are not allowed, that you're not allowed to inappropriately text a student or an athlete.
We already have policies that say that you're not allowed to be doing those things. What we're trying to do is, I don't want to sit there and say, okay, well, look, 50 students are going to go somewhere, but the only way you can communicate with your teacher is you have to give that teacher your private phone number in order to facilitate communication while you're at that event. Well, what's the purpose of even having the policy then? We've just opened up a Pandora's box by saying it to those kids, and if it's just that event, well, it's going to be an athletic event, it's going to be a TSA event, it's going to be a band event, it's going to be any kind of event where everybody is going to say, well, look, convenience is going to trump safety here, so let's just open the door and let everybody communicate that way. That's my personal opinion on it. I'm not the only one. I hear what Frank's saying, which is, look, the technology's out there. So how do you stop kids from using the technology and the teachers from using the technology?
But by instituting a policy, how is that preventing a teacher from ever getting a phone number or the teacher from giving their phone number to a student?
Look, how do you prevent a burglar from breaking into a building? You put the best protections you can put in place. If somebody wants to smash a window, they're going to smash a window. Some teacher wants to grab a student while they're outside in the parking lot and say, hey, give me your phone number. We can't stop that from happening. But I can certainly not encourage students to say, hey, look, while you're at this event, I want you to use your personal phone and communicate with that teacher over there. As a district, I'm telling you that's okay to do it, and you should communicate that way in order to participate in that event. Now the student's going, oh, all right, that's what I got to do. Okay, so now here's my phone number going to somebody, and maybe that kid doesn't feel so great about that. Maybe the parents don't know what's going on. I don't feel comfortable with that at all, and I personally will vote against anything that allows that to happen. Now, it'd be nice if there was some sort of Dropbox technology out there where a kid could take their personal cell phone, send a text to an 800 number, and that 800 number then forwards it to another phone. If there's that kind of technology available, I'd love to hear about it, because then it solves a problem, right? There's a blind wall between teacher and student that allows them to communicate with their own personal devices, but they're not sharing personal contact information. So I'm all about whatever they're doing outside campus and facilitating that kind of communication. I'm not against that. I'm just trying to figure out a way how can we do that teacher or faculty member, which could be a volunteer or anybody, walks away with all that personal information. And I've seen the lists. I mean, I've seen it where, certain coaches or whoever, they've got, 140 kids' personal email addresses and phone numbers.
I don't think anybody's debating the merit of student safety. The policy clearly is put in place to protect students. Everybody wants to protect students. When you are a teacher and you're taking 30-some kids and now you're responsible for their well-being, having a cell phone as an extra layer of protection is valid. If you're trying to keep track of where people are all over the place and you're now responsible for the safety of that child and you don't know where they are, the technology today allows me to place where that child is, that's valuable.
I don't dispute that at all. When I was reading what Dr. Ida proposed, I'm thinking, well, I would agree with Frank. Having one phone on one end, I don't think solves the problem. So I was thinking, all right, well, do you then pick, if you've got 30 students, do you pick 5 of those students? And they got to hang out in groups of 6. And, those 5 students also get district phones, and that's the way it works. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, I know when I traveled abroad and did things as a student, we didn't have phones.
Right.
We had a buddy system,
feel safer
and you
knowing
had
that as a
chaperones,
parent.
and all those types of things. And chaperone was responsible for these 5 students, and you had to be here at a certain time. You weren't there at a certain time. And where was your buddy? And all that kind of stuff. Somehow we made it work for 50 years
I
or so.
agree with that. Absolutely, I agree. It worked up until the point texting and phones became available. The issue becomes now is that is such a part of our children's society, or I'm speaking about high school, our high schooler society, and I can tell you, in a 4-day period of time, or excuse me, 2-day period of time, I had to change my child's schedule, a private lesson that they had 4 times, because of miscommunication with the captains of the team. I shouldn't have to be doing that 4 times because it was inappropriate. It should be coming from the coach. You're asking now captains then to communicate to these students.
Well, look, maybe our coaches, are going to need to do a better job of, hey, look, this is when the schedule starts and this is when the schedule stops, and if a variation occurs, then he's just going to have to do a better job of picking up the phone and calling parents, or sending emails out to students' accounts, and nowadays,
I always thought, when it comes to issues like that, and I don't want to try to,
I understand you're trying to
point counterpoint every little issue, but
understand.
there are other things that can be used in certain circumstances, like we talked at the last meeting. That whole Connect Ed message thing, is that what it's called? I mean, that should be used more often. If a coach needs to change something, look, the plan is all you kids are going to show up at this time on this field to do this. If something changes, he sends out a Connect Ed, and it goes out to all those kids. There's ways of communicating for those things. I have some sympathy when it comes to the special events, because, if you're out there with all these kids, and if my kid's one of them, I want to make sure that they can get in touch with the person who is there, whether it's the teacher or whether it's another parent who is watching that group of kids, or whatever. There needs to be some kind of ability in an emergency situation to make sure you can have some kind of contact somehow. So I've got sympathy for that, but all these other regular things. We've got Connect Ed. We've got other mechanisms.
About daily things, but I think we're mostly talking about the special circumstances when you're traveling with kids, and mostly we've been talking about cell phones, but there's also the issue of Facebook. I have a teacher who travels abroad, and the parents connect back and forth with Facebook, and therefore there's that communication. Would that be deemed inappropriate? Is that in violation of the
From a
policy?
parent, there's not. Parent can talk to a teacher.
Well, but it's the parents and the students.
Yeah, see, I think if you can Facebook somebody, you can email them. You know what I mean?
Right, that's true.
You don't need to be. You don't need to be using social media. If you got access to the web, you got access to a Gmail account. You got access to a DBoon account of some kind. So I don't think that. At least that's the way I look at it. And
The philosophy
that's not emergency.
The philosophy that I've tried to adopt, and I think we didn't put the original of this policy together. We just ramped it up in terms of the texting. Is keeping communication between staff and students as public as possible and monitorable, if that's a word, to the extent possible that we can, because it's when you can't monitor it that the problems occur. And Facebook has some privacy features to it where you can lock out the world. Our email account, you can't do that. We have total access to anybody. I can go in and ask the technology director tomorrow to pull up Mr. McElmoyle's email for the week. I have that authority. And that's because of the acceptable use policy that we have and federal laws that allow us to do that. That's not an invasion of anyone's privacy. We own that email. I can't do that to your Gmail account.
Is when you're around, not all the kids, most of the kids have a cell phone, but they don't all have a smartphone, so you can't necessarily email them on a school account. But you
they
can call.
could email the parent. Like, I enjoy getting I know my kids do stuff, and every one of their coaches has a Boone email. The coach emails me. I can then read the email and say, oh, something has changed. If I have access, most of the time I do, then I can call my child and say, hey, did you know that practice changed?
Right.
9 out of 10, they already knew it. Because all the kids in school said, hey, did you hear this? Did you hear this? Did you hear it? And they all talk to each other in school. So, but I like knowing.
I have access like that. I have a smartphone, but I have a job in which I'm responsible to do certain things, and I do not have access. So
These are more like the daily occurrences. I'm thinking more of like an emergency situation. Like you're not going to have time to email a parent, wait for them to see it and contact a kid. If you're out and about with them under.
Well, well, you say 30 kids you take to this
I'm not
event.
taking the kids anywhere.
Well, either way, the TSA, what is this, the TSA's? If you're taking 30 kids somewhere.
Oh, it could be
how many
TSA, it
chaperones
could
do
be
you
any
have?
event that leaves the district.
Well,
TSA just happens to be the one we
Even on a
talked
field
about.
trip, when we had the kids over at the Renaissance Fair, I mean, at that
Right.
time, the kids were all texting each other, but, I mean, we stayed together in a group, so that's really a non-issue.
But how many chaperones you normally take with you if you have 30? You just need 3, 1, 30,
That's not
10?
specified in our policy, by the way.
How many chaperones you have to have per student?
So, I mean, well, the other night they said 1 per 10 for something. I forget.
We were talking about that today.
It's usually where you're headed. They require, let's say Hershey Park. Well, we need 1 staff person for every 20 students or every 10 students.
They won't let you in the place without.
But we don't have it in our policy.
And what constitutes a chaperone? Is a teacher a chaperone?
A volunteer
Or
can be a
Volunteer
chaperone.
can be a
So
chaperone.
All
oftentimes we have
volunteers
to
that
get
come to the
parents.
board to be approved before the...
Right, they would have to be approved volunteers.
And they fall under the policy then.
Yes, that's correct.
Approved volunteers are whom?
Anybody that submits to us, they go through what's called the Raptor system. They have to have clearances. They're cleared just as though they were an employee.
Is that fairly new?
No.
No,
we
we've
put
been
that
doing
in
that
place
for
a couple of
years.
years ago.
Couple, 2, 3 years?
I think it was like 3 years
Easy
ago.
now, as long as I've been here, easy.
When I went, my kids.
Yeah, now, yeah, now we would run you through the state police and all that kind of stuff
Right,
to make
there's
sure
like
you.
2 levels, right? There's 2 different.
At the elementary level, if you're going to be in the room with the teacher, there was less amount of clearance that you needed than if you were going to take them out in the hallway or to a separate room.
And then, so when you're talking, when you leave the school district, is that also include band and the football team? And that,
Well,
so that
that's the slippery slope, right? I mean, if you open up the door for one activity, you're going to have to open up the door for all the activities, right? I mean, last time we were here, we had the people from the TSA saying, look, we just want this for TSA. Well, that's not going to fly. People at band are going to want it for band. People at football or
Tennis
soccer or
coach
whatever.
wanted it. I know the tennis coach wanted it.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm
so-
talking about chaperones as well.
Well, chaperones is a universal thing. I mean, you have to volunteer to be.
You have to apply.
You have to apply to be a volunteer in the school district, and you have to get cleared for whatever the process is that we have in place, whether it's a rapid check, and I think there's another check that we run.
All the teacher
Is there a
clearances.
ratio?
Obviously, we don't have a policy of a certain number of faculty, because once you become a volunteer, you're considered faculty in terms of our policy. And faculty includes everybody, okay? Volunteers,
I said
teachers.
staff. We've interpreted staff to
yeah,
mean
staff,
everybody.
whatever it is. Yeah, so everybody is staff at that point in time. And apparently we don't have a quota per se of, X number of kids per staff member. And maybe we should look at that.
I would suggest guidelines rather than a state.
I would think if I'm responsible for taking 100 kids to Harrisburg or wherever they do this TSA thing, I would want at least 10 other staff members there, so I got at least a ratio of 1 per 10 kids, so that they can keep their eye. You can't keep your eye on 100 kids. I mean, I don't.
Would the committee be interested or entertain the thought of parents signing a waiver? Now,
Well, that's
not
what-
Just, not just with the cell phones with the district. I mean a waiver in general.
A waiver in general for what?
Saying that I am relinquishing the school district for not the individual, not the teacher or the person or the volunteer or faculty member, but the school district. I'm relinquishing any liability that the school district has.
I think-
Is that something that would be...
That's
When it gets
solicitor
individual
question.
like that, I think it's going to be so difficult for,
Because they always
let's say
represent
that's the case and it's a
institution.
coach and a coach has 30 kids and 12 of them have a waiver and the other ones don't and they have to figure out, it's too difficult.
Plus, I don't think a waiver. I mean, from a liability issue, I don't think a waiver is going to hold up in court no matter what. I'm not so worried about a liability issue as I am, That's why we have insurance, and that's what lawyers can figure out when they get in court about people suing each other. I'm more concerned about once something happens to a kid, you can't take it back, right?
Once the bell's rung, I get it.
Yeah.
However, I know my mom trains my kids. I know where my child is. I know where my other child is. I know where they are all the time. I take responsibility for that. I take responsibility for the discipline in my home. I do. I do not feel that the school district has the responsibility for morality of their staff.
You're a good parent, okay? there are a lot of parents that are.
I'm willing to sign the waiver.
That's what I'm saying, but there's a lot of parents that aren't, and they're willing to sign a waiver too. And if you get, like as Mr. Sermonello just said, you get 30 kids and 15 parents or 29 parents sign a waiver, well, what's the point of the policy?
It should be a non-issue if every parent read all their kids' emails and if every parent read all their kids' texts, but they don't.
Yeah, I mean, I was horrified. Look, my kids aren't at the level that where this is going on, but when I was talking to counselors and stuff like that, what I was told was the stuff that you read about is a fraction of what's actually going on out there. It is much more prevalent than you can possibly imagine, and they're dealing with it. The school counselors are dealing with it. Private counselors are dealing with it every single day, and it's.
I don't think you can make the assumption that all the teachers that we have are predators.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
That's not, and I honestly want to say, we all know what happened in this community a little while ago regarding this, and that incident did not start this. We had already begun to think about this long before.
2 years ago.
It was really just unfortunately coincidental, because I can tell you my antenna were up after going to a number of Safe Schools conferences over the last 2 years, just about what Mr. Basil's saying. There are horror stories out there well beyond what happened here.
Well, my antenna was up when my child came home and said, oh yeah, she had this picture on her desk. Excuse me, that went, nobody noticed that? Nobody said anything? I'm getting off the subject, I apologize. Now, I am friends with my child's coach as a parent. We've had coach over to our house for dinner on F1F under the second page of your amended section that's highlighted. Staff level relationship outside the school setting as either a relative or a close family friend. I know both my daughter's coaches. I know their families. Is that a can of worms? I mean,
well, look, I think it's
let me just say something. My intent with these amendments are to try to, and I can't assume that the board is going to approve. I'm trying to bounce on hearing from the public with what I believe was the original intent of this policy. Obviously, there's been a hue and a cry. We could have just said, you know what, go away. We're not interested in talking about this. We're interested in talking about it. I just don't know that there's ever going to be an easy resolution to this, and I would not have put the policy forward if I thought the board should have never done it. That would be like a setup. I'm setting them to get beat up. That's not my intent. My intent is the safety of all the students, as we've said that. So I think we may be a long way yet from putting something in place that will allow us to maintain this. I just want to say that. So F was intended to allow for, because we had last month someone said, well, I babysit, or I do this, or I do that with the kid outside of school. I was trying to create a circumstance where we're not going to look the other way with that, but it's really not in our domain at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night if you're using one of our students as a babysitter in that situation. You would hope that the parents are involved in that and everything. There are just some circumstances. Our policy can't cover 24/7, 7 days a week.
I think F would say that as long as it's not involved with an activity.
Correct. School-related purposes.
Can occur.
Yeah.
So if my child's coach is at my house, she leaves and she texts my daughter, who's her captain, inappropriate.
No, well, I think
there's always going to be a gray area.
I think. Look, if you work for a company, a lot of times companies say, "Look, I don't want you using your personal phone, right? You have a business phone, you got your personal phone, and never shall the two cross. You've got your personal email accounts, you got your business email account. Never the two shall cross, right? And I don't see that as any differently here. You've got a situation where you're friends with 17 teachers here and they're personal friends, and 100 students because your daughter's popular and you're a volunteer, right? So now you're entwined in the fabric of this school district, right? Like nobody else. Well, while you're here and you're working, I would say you shouldn't be using your phone to text these other kids about some party your daughter's going to have back at your house later on that evening, right? I mean, you're going to wait until the day's over or whatever it is, and then you can go ahead and do what you need to do to communicate that way. while you're here and you're in the capacity of a volunteer, you should be using the tools that we provide to you, which would be a DBoon email account or whatever it is, a ConnectEd call or something else to communicate with those same kids regarding whatever activity, school activity it is. So if it's you're involved as a volunteer soccer coach or something like that, well then you're going to communicate through the tools that we give you. Afterwards, if you're talking about your friends and your family and their friends, and it's about a party or going somewhere or on a trip or whatever, then use whatever personal device you want. I mean, we can't ban people from contacting folks that they're friends with. I mean,
but only if it's they can on their personal time. Only if it's not about the activity or school or after. I mean, I don't.
There's going to be some discretion, right? You have those numbers anyway. So how are we going to stop you from doing what you're doing? But we can try to put.
I don't want to have a coach be reprimanded, fired, any of those things because this perhaps wasn't discussed or thought of prior to an initiation of a policy.
See, my thought on this policy is you can't stop things, but to say it is not okay for a teacher or let's say teacher.
Staff. Let's say staff, period.
Staff. It's not okay. Well, I got to use teacher for this example.
All right. Okay.
It's not okay for a teacher to say, listen, if you don't understand the homework, just text me.
No.
It's not okay. That's what I want to see in the policy. It's not okay, and we don't endorse any communication between a teacher and a student for any type of day-to-day activity. Now, these special events, I mean, I think we're going a little... now I know you guys don't feel that way, but I think it goes a
violation
little...
of the policy. So we're reading this, and am I doing that? Does this apply to me? Am I going to get fired?
And that's why I think the conversation needs to continue, because I think people want to do what's right by the policy.
But I think there's a lot, there are quite a few teachers, and I'm even reading stuff as we're talking. There are a lot of teachers, and this is, I'm not reading anything Daniel Boone specific, I'm just reading in general, that feel like it's a valuable tool, and they think that they could teach students things and use that as a medium. And I don't think that's right. I think that's the policy that I think is wrong.
And when you're dealing with children, and that's the language they speak, teachers naturally adopt that. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's how kids communicate today.
Right.
But there's got to be, I got a feeling there's got to be a Dropbox system out there that you can, they have it for emails.
Well, I was going to ask, who is our cell phone provider? Is it Verizon or AT&T? I
mean, how is it any different than you can call an 800 number and it forwards? There's call forwarding of all kinds these days.
So why can't we call Sprint or Verizon and say, hey, listen?
Well, let me. I think the biggest issue is the immediacy of the text. I think people can work around the email.
But you can email. You can text to an 800 number that forwards that text to another number. You know what I'm saying?
You can do all that. But what I'm saying is, why don't we go to the experts? Why don't we call Sprint or whoever our provider is and say, listen, we've got this issue. You tell us what technology is available to help us with this issue, to make it a win-win. And let's see what they have to say. Instead of us ever guessing month after month over, what's available out there and what we can do. Go to the experts.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's...
I'm not one of them. That's why I'm just sitting
No, that's what I'm saying. I agree with Frank, but I find it hard to believe... I mean, they've got email systems out. They've got, call forwarding devices out there nowadays that you can pay a subscription for, and so you sign them up. Hey, look, we've got TSA event coming up. Parents, sign up your kids' numbers. They're going to be sitting in this Dropbox over here. The faculty member or staff member is never going to have access to it. Everyone gets the same 800 number that they text to, and it just goes back and forth, and it's a method of communication between one and the other. That kind of solves the issue. For me, at least, is that the staff members aren't getting personal information of the kids. The kids, quite frankly, aren't getting the personal information of the staff member. As a teacher, I'd be a little worried about somebody stalking me, for crying out loud.
I agree.
If there was a student that was infatuated with me or something else, I mean, you could have an issue there.
It could go both ways.
It could go both ways, absolutely. And you have. I don't know. I'm not going to characterize things, but you got some.
It could be a student who is kind of PO'd at a teacher for some reason, and they start making prank phone calls and writing a number on walls, and it could go both ways. It could be horrible. As a teacher, I would never give out my cell phone number to a student. I mean, that's just so. You got no break then. You kind of.
Yeah, right. Well, one, you're always on.
You're always on.
You're always on the job, but the two. The wrong kids gets a hold of it.
So, if I could sum it up here, there's no support here for, I've got to call the question here.
Yeah.
There's no support here for any kind of waiver from the parents.
I don't think it totally solves I don't think it makes either side comfortable.
I mean, I can't support a waiver at the moment. I mean, I just can't. That's just my personal feeling. Maybe there's another 5 board members that do support a waiver and it doesn't make a difference. Then you put the waiver in place. I just got a feeling that once the waiver gets in place, as a parent, if I want the convenience of it or whatever, I'm going to sign the waiver. And then now you got, half the student population has waivers signed and
well, the waiver was only, the way it's written, it's only for limited events and
I understand that, but once you sign the waiver for that one limited event,
then you get
I've got the number, right?
Yeah.
I've got the number. So
okay.
you don't sign the waiver next time, it doesn't matter. I've already got the number.
I can't reconcile that.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Without technology help.
Yeah.
And I'm not expert enough in that area to know what the technology solution might be. I've talked with our technology director, and he said he would start researching it, but he doesn't. He's unaware of.
The heck with that. Go right to the source. Go to these Fortune 100 companies that do this stuff every day, and they've got a technological solution that's going to solve this. I mean, our IT director here, that's out of his core competency. I think you need to go right to the source, and don't just call one carrier. If you have to call 3 or 4, maybe switch carriers for crying out loud. Or do you get a separate plan with a different carrier that's just going to solve this one particular issue?
Maybe we can start with Connect Ed. Maybe they would have a way of knowing. They're communication experts. Mass communication, because that's what we're talking about. Mass immediate communication.
I mean, even if we get, for right now, one-way communication from the staff or coaches or to the kids, that's tremendous.
Yeah, I think Connect Ed does that today. I don't know why we don't use it.
Respond and say, yeah, but I won't be there. They'll figure it out later. I think the immediate, the game's been moved. You can't, buses aren't going to be here at that time. There's been issues, problems.
They already can do that.
How do they do that?
Look, there's voice to text.
Change it like that?
My daughter's volleyball district match was Friday morning. She was supposed to play on Saturday. Friday morning, the athletic facilitator, her title, called the coach and said, game's been moved. Coach contacted me, having problems. Game's been moved. I said, but that's a problem because you don't have access to any of your JV girls. Varsity's practicing at 5 tonight. You'll have access to that. Game then was moved back to its original. In the newspaper, the old time was posted, which was the incorrect time. So I'm reading the newspaper, I take a picture, send it to the coach, said, so when does my kid have to be there for the bus?
Now, how often does that happen?
I can say I'm texting coaches at least minimum once to 3 or 4 times a week per coach.
So let me ask you this, because I don't want to oversimplify it. I don't know the complexity of it. But for every event, every athletic team or band or whatever it is, any organized group of kids that get together, how difficult is it at the beginning of that season to say, here's a list of all the kids, the roster of all the kids that are in this event, not the coach, but somebody in the administration. Here's a list of all the kids and their phone numbers, and all their parents and their phone numbers. Add this distribution list to Connect Ed, and then let the coach have access to that distribution list.
You can
It's already
create.
happening now by email. I mean, the coach.
But again, email's an issue if you're not home, like
Right,
your
coach send out
scenario.
the weekly schedule and the night before a game, a reminder and all that. And all that comes to the Daniel Boone website, and it goes out to your phone email or your whatever. So, I mean, that's there.
But that doesn't solve her problem. That doesn't solve that problem. So I'm trying to solve that problem.
Email's not a safety device. Email's an informational device.
At the beginning of the sports season, every football player's got a cell phone. Their numbers listed. Their parents' numbers are listed. It goes into it creates a distribution list for the 2012, high school football team, and now the coach or whoever has access to that distribution list to send the Connect Ed out. How complicated is that?
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Who does Connect Ed? Who
Blackboard
administers?
Connect is the company. Mr. Hawes oversees.
Mr. Hawes does creates the. So when there's a new when a new student enters the school,
Well, actually, all the
who gets
buildings-
their phone number in Connect Ed so that it gets blasted?
the district secretaries enter that into the system. We have trained each one of them. They put in all the
Okay.
data for.
So it's one of our people.
So it's
that can do
our
that.
people.
So our
local.
people would say, oh, okay, I got from the coach their roster for this year, and she keys in the ConnectEd distribution list for that group of kids. Right? Because you've got different distribution lists, right? You don't always blast everybody. You can send just a high school or
High school sends out ConnectEds that go nowhere else but the high school.
Right.
Middle school, elementary.
I think that solves
we
a
can
lot
do
of
a ConnectEd.
actually, a lot of
we
that
we
issue
have
that you
ConnectEd by bus.
Right. Okay. Wow.
So now you could do it by sport.
We already have that.
We already pay for that.
Right, we already pay for that.
So I'm not saying eliminate the email stuff. You still do the email, but now you've also got to ConnectEd, get something out. And that handles kind of the day-to-day issues. Now we just have to deal with the special event issues and figure out how to. And again, I think if we get Verizon or AT&T in here and say, "Listen, help us. How do you make this work?" You know, I think we could probably solve it.
I can continue to work on it.
Google offers a service for crying out loud. Anyone can send a text message to your Google number, and the message will be forwarded only to those phones you've marked as XYZ.
It's only up to 6. I was just looking at it. It says only up to 6 numbers.
Well, I mean,
I know, but
that's a retail component that they're offering. I'm sure you could pay. That's free. I mean, I'm sure we can pay for something that. Verizon's got something on here for it. So.
But the question is we want two-way shielded communication.
Right.
I don't.
Right.
How would you?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is you're forwarding to a Google number, right? And from the Google number it goes out,
the Google
and
number
vice
on
versa.
your phone?
It's the Google number. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's not my personal number. It's a Google number that you're forwarding it to, and from there it remotes out to whatever other numbers you identify. And that's what we're talking about. And those phones in turn go back, and it goes to whoever. So you can allocate where the message goes. Forwarded text to another number like call forward, AT&T. I mean, Verizon's got the same thing. I just got to believe, like Frank said, let's just talk to the experts, and there's got to be there's probably a real easy solution to this. I can't believe they don't have technology that allows you to do that.
The question again isn't I just want to make sure that we have the ability to know what's being said back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but we would control that intermediary number, right? It'd be a district intermediary number, and you're going to say, look, we're going to identify whatever it is, the football team numbers, and those are on the distribution list. And on the other side of that are the coaches'
But
numbers.
don't you have to? Aren't we defeating the purpose? You have to give that number to the advisor then anyway. To be entered in.
No. If I'm a staff member, I'm just getting the Google number, whatever the intermediary number is. I'm not getting the kids' numbers.
Oh, okay.
Right? And the kids aren't getting
I
the
don't
coaches'
know the
numbers. They're getting the
technology.
intermediary number as well. So I think that's just something.
You could monitor phone conversations. You could monitor what was said.
You can't monitor what is being said. That's true. But if we're talking about texting, that's what this was, forwarding texts.
Okay.
You definitely get a hold of that, and obviously these phone companies, as Frank said, they hold on to that information forever. Once it's digitized, it never goes away.
And I do think in the range of the conversation, the analogy about if somebody wants to break into your house, they're going to do it. You can put up everything, all the firewalls and everything that you want to. But I think the intent of this is to not make that so easy.
Yeah, we don't want to open the door.
Don't condone it. Yeah,
we don't want to leave the door
anything
open,
that condones.
right?
Right.
They
We don't
want
want
to break in through the window, that's fine, but we're not going to leave the door open to help facilitate the crime.
Can I
So-
ask a final question?
Sure.
So, wait a minute. Just hold your thought here.
I was hoping it's final.
No. Just hold your thought. I don't mean to interrupt. So we're going to explore a one-way ConnectEd system to allow group blasts to go out.
My opinion is that whenever any kind of activity is set up, as soon as that activity is set up, I think a distribution list of names and phone numbers for that activity should be added to ConnectEd. And just a procedural thing. Every time, 2012 marching band.
So we would
put it in. Oh,
we would
high
put kids' cell phone numbers on there. So the advisor really should never see those numbers.
Correct.
That goes to the centralized person.
Correct.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we've defeated the purpose.
The secretary
Whoever
who does the
somebody at the
ConnectEd now.
district level, right?
Okay.
Someone at the district level keys that in there and says, here's a ConnectEd that can be used for those circumstances, for when practice changes last minute, or
That's where I think it would be important to have parental approval to use that even on the Connect Ed.
So you
they
get
know
parental
that that's
approval,
happening.
but at the same time, then, as Frank said, then
Because
something changes.
see, the difference is the Connect Ed system, as I understand it now, goes to parent, it doesn't go to kids.
That's correct.
So we would be now adding a new layer to Connect Ed, kids' phone numbers. We don't do that now. So that's why I say that information has to be shared outside of the person that we don't really want to see it in the first place. That was the whole point of not giving out the number. So you can't have the coach collect those numbers.
No, the coach wouldn't collect those numbers.
No.
So that's the point.
The parents would submit those numbers to.
There'd be a form, and then
Right.
the forms, it would say, submit this to the.
I get it now.
The kid can submit it in an envelope, or it
I
goes to
just
the
wanted to
Matthew
be
Brook
clear
building.
on that if we would say to the coach, go collect the numbers, well,
No.
Just have it emailed to us. Whatever
It goes to the
Right.
whatever
to
secretary.
a confidential account, like you giving up your credit card number where it's supposed to be encrypted or something. All right, so that's one, Connect Ed system for that. The other one is to research a texting solution.
Text forwarding or line texting or something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
And call the major.
I just didn't want to lose, I'm getting tired, I don't want to lose that thought. That can happen when I'm not tired, but.
My final question just was, while this policy is still, I know it's written and set, but there's still clearly gray areas. Should teachers have concern? What should I tell teachers in the meantime?
Policy.
Error on the side of safety.
Err on the side of caution.
Don't do it.
Well, I would say this, I don't think
Like
there's
are there
any.
any field trips in the immediate?
Well, let me say this. I don't think there's any debate on the email issue. There's been no debate on that. There's been no concern about that. The Facebook issue has a little bit of a gray area, but there's really not much of a debate. A teacher and a student, purely that are just the only relationship that they have is you're my English teacher. There's no reason for you to be connected on Facebook. If you happen to be somebody's cousin, aunt, or uncle, I don't think we're out looking, to be peeking around the family tree. However, the texting part is the one that is still, there is no real gray area right now, so we're going to have to move as quickly as we can to make sure that, frankly, we're not, the only way that we would ever know there is a violation is if someone would say, hey, we're not out inspecting the universe of cell phones. Yeah. So we would have to wait for someone to say, hey, you know what, I got a text from so-and-so, and then we have to go, well, you weren't supposed to do that. So until we, get a report of it, I mean, that's really the only way we're ever going to find out, frankly. So
Yeah. I think that Connect Ed solves a good chunk of that. Not everything, obviously, but a good chunk. If you're away with 50, 60 kids on a field trip and they get away from you, you can just send a Connect Ed to everybody saying, in 15 minutes, meet us here, or whatever. But
that one I think has some
we still didn't solve the whole thing.
We don't have the
At least we're
two-way yet.
solving
We don't
some
have
of
the
it.
two-way yet, where a kid's stuck over here and got swept away by a crowd of people, and now he's lost. And
Okay, but at the same time, that kid probably has other kids' phone numbers that they're traveling with because they're
Understood.
friends, and they can always call their parents. They can call the police. I mean, our staff doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all. I mean, when you got lost when you were a kid and you didn't have a cell phone, you went and found a police officer, and they got a hold of your parents or somebody else and helped you find
Understood.
your way home again. So I don't think we need to say that that they're.
no, our shield can't be all-encompassing. I think what parents are looking for is.
And I wouldn't want that responsibility if I was a staff member, for crying out loud.
You still have a Daniel Boone cell phone that the kids, I guess you want the kids to
The more I hear about the Daniel Boone cell phone, that may not solve our problem.
Yeah, let's get some experts to help
May I
us
ask
with it.
a quick question
Sure.
about Facebook? I administer a public page for the Relay for Life of Daniel Boone.
That's
on
different.
Facebook. Okay.
We have a Daniel Boone Facebook page. For God's sake, we have our own Facebook page.
My name does not appear on it. They're not friends with me.
Yeah.
They like the page.
And that's to the point that we're talking about. That's
I
totally
just wanted to check to
viewable.
make sure that was in the
Yeah,
purview.
you can't private message onto a page like that, can you?
You can, but I don't. And if we get a private message, there are more administrators than myself, and they
Can we private message on our Facebook page?
Oh, is that a Relay for Life Is that a Daniel Boone Relay for Life page?
Yeah.
Well, and you administer that and own it and whatever. I mean, maybe as a school district, you just say, hey, look, I need a Facebook page for this Daniel Boone Club. Well, now it's the Daniel Boone Facebook Relay for Life page, and you don't have to take ownership of that. I mean, you can say, well, look, I want to push the content, but it's the district page. You understand?
That protects
and
you.
That protects you, and it allows us to monitor what's being sent out on that page.
With that wonderful idea, easy solution, I will, I'll have to figure out how to do it. Because
Talk to our IT guy.
Scott Matz is really good with
Right.
That works for the Blazer Abroad.
Whatever. I think any club where you've got a club Facebook page, I mean, there's no reason why it can't be. How is it any different than a web page? A website. If we got a football website, you got a, I don't know, whatever it is, the Spanish club.
Different clubs have had different Facebook pages that they've shut down because of the community.
Make it a Daniel Boone, sponsored Facebook page, and we control it. So long as it's in our domain and we control the content,
Well, I
then that's
can
the important
simply
thing.
invite the Daniel Boone Area School District page to be one of the administrators. So
However you want to do it. I mean, I don't know what
still
that.
post things on.
I don't know the
there.
technology.
Quite frankly, they probably wouldn't want to post anything on it, but they will have the same rights on that page.
Our Facebook page from the district level gets a lot of hits.
Yes, it does.
It's a good push technology.
Yeah, it actually
you can
gets
send
a lot of
messages
hits.
out to whoever. So you can have the TSA page, and if that's what pushes the message out to the kids, then whatever it is. But I think, so long as we have ownership, but we have.
Like I said, it is a public page, whether you have ownership of it or not. You can see almost as much as I can. The only thing you can't see are the private messages. But again, I make sure that I don't have anything to do with it.
No, but
The district site.
You can't. That's good.
obviously,
That's
if we're an
You can post,
administrator,
but you can't message.
then we can see your private messages
Exactly.
that are going out, and that's I think where we want to be.
Knowing my technology guy, they probably locked that feature out.
It doesn't post as me personally. It
Yeah.
posts as the relationship.
Yeah, I know. I've got a couple of them myself for our businesses, but
My name is not on it.
yeah.
Just check.
Yep.
Thank you very much for the.
No, thank you for bringing it up, because otherwise we would never have thought about it. So that obviously needs to be communicated to all the clubs and whoever's got these random pages out there, that we need to bring them underneath the Daniel Boone umbrella.
That's a great club, by the way.
Thank you very much. Your son is an integral part of it.
Yes, he does enjoy it very much.
He's doing a
Are you talking about making club Facebook pages?
Well, apparently there are these Facebook pages out there floating around there now that the clubs and extracurricular activities have that
Now,
They shut a lot of them down.
that
in most cases, those are set up by the students, and the administrators are students. And the reason for that is in order to invite someone to be an administrator, the one who creates the page has to be friends
Right.
with that person. So
Yeah, I don't know
will
what-
not
I don't know
invite
what-
current students to be administrators of the Relay for Life page, because I'm not going to friend any of them, and I'm not friends with any of them. So it would be very helpful from an advisor standpoint if the district would come alongside and sort of take over ownership of that, so that I can interact with them on that page, again, not as myself,
right.
but as
In your
sophomore
role.
class advisor.
Right, in your
with
role.
those students, because currently they can interact on that page, but I cannot.
Right.
That
Right.
makes
So
sense?
yeah, absolutely it does. And so you can like the page,
Right,
and then now,
right.
Well, and to expand the question, because we're not too far off, if teachers have Facebook pages that they use as Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so to connect out with kids with homework assignments and things like that, because I'm not sure if they do it, if they do not exist, but is it somebody, if they ask the questions, could I have a Facebook page under Daniel Boone to help push out my information that way?
I would say yes, if we administer it.
If you had administered,
If you lose the the ability to not monitor private messaging, which is where you get in trouble on the Facebook. Let's face it, wherever you can keep your message secret is where the trouble occurs.
Is there a
So
solution
if-
to that than just using your Daniel Boone webpage?
it came up in.
I mean, this is an emerging technology. We have to learn to work with it.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
agree with you. We got to figure out how to.
Those messages would show
not an
up
emerging, it's already emerged.
But yeah, I know what you mean. I agree with you.
There were some teachers who were starting to have Facebook pages because it was what kids wanted to do. The kids were interested in it.
It's almost like what we're trying to do is counter to what the technology is trying to allow you to do. You know what I mean? That's why I think the pushback is coming.
Well, people get used to using it. Now we're taking it away, so you're
Right.
going to get pushback.
If you put something on there, it would show up on it, and they're on that. Yeah.
I mean, I think to the degree, like
May I have the
it's been our same message, whether it's been a website or anything else. We want everything under our domain, and so that we have control of it. And
Those paper
Some people
policies.
use that and
I got them.
might be a better.
That, so I can put it in the minutes.
Well, I'll hand it to Lori, but if you want to hand it to Bill, we'll put
Dr.
it
Rada,
over
do I
there.
copy them then?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I figured I'd put it in the minutes.
Well, are you going to do minutes?
Thought I had to.
No, I think the
record the
recordings.
minutes. We just need to record the names.
Oh,
and
okay. There you go.
Just say what the names
We
are.
always post these recordings as the minutes.
Well, before you turn it off, I would just say what the names were and who was present and what time the meeting ends.
Okay. Meeting, any other questions? We'll adjourn the meeting.
Meeting adjourned. Also in attendance tonight were 5 members of the public: Amy Hicks, Tracy Driehaus, Megan Weber, Robin Vidovich, and Terry Nefa. Meeting adjourned, 9:25.